Jacob had been an orderly for about 2 years now, and in that time he had learned the ins and outs of his profession. He had his hands full, and he certainly couldn't complain of boredom. Smith changed the bed in room 7, and then helped Johnson take the patient to the ultrasound, the head nurse said. Jacob nodded and hurried to do his errands. He was very conscientious about his duties and never broke the house rules. Now the young nurse was hurrying with a stack of fresh linens to the room of Stephen Bennett, the powerful businessman whose health was fading before Jacob's eyes. The rich man was emphatically polite and never allowed himself to be rude to him. Of course, the businessman was in a special, so-called VIP room, but that didn't change the matter. Jacob took care of him as he did all the other patients. The ward for the critically ill had a couple more meters to go before turning the corner and entering a corridor with an even row of rooms on either side. When he heard muffled male voices, Jacob froze for a moment. He didn't like to eavesdrop, and he never did. But this conversation, for some reason, caught his attention in tone and intonation. Jacob realized that 2 people were talking. One of the people talking was Ben Casey, a local medical luminary and a treasure trove of medical knowledge. The other was Edward Green, a doctor of dubious reputation, who had a bad reputation in the clinic. It was said that the doctor was dirty and worked in the department more because of bribes than because of personal ambition and desire to help sick people. The conversation included roughly the following. It was Edward Green who started it. "Ben, have you heard that Bennett from Ward 7 is going to die?" His companion thought for a moment, and then answered rather sharply. "No, I haven't heard of anything like that. Why should you have?" Green answered almost immediately. "Of course. And how else? The whole department knows about it. Bennett had the family notary called in today, saying he'd had a bad dream. He says he won't last long." "That's strange. Why has he lost heart?" "His chances are quite real. Personally, I've operated on heavier patients, and nothing. They live, run, even dance at their own wedding. You should be careful with these rumors, Edward." "We're a nation of rumors," Ben said, "because we're a nation of people who will make up things that never happened." "What kind of rumors are rumors, Ben? I witnessed it myself." The rich man took out his phone and called a notary via video link, saying, "Prepare me a will, according to which all my property goes to my wife," Green said, raising his voice involuntarily. "Okay, Edward, that's not necessary. Our business is to save patients, not to demagogue. I think Bennett knows best who to bequeath what to. I'm gonna go. I don't have time. I've got rounds to make. I suggest you do the same," Ben said in a tone that brooked no objection. Jacob froze in amazement, almost dropping the bale of laundry from his hands. What was this? Stephen was going to die. Jacob's heart began to scratch too. Not so long ago he'd been talking to this patient and everything had been fine. Now Bennett was going to call a notary and leave everything to his wife. Imagining the smug face of the future Harris, the orderly involuntarily wrinkled his nose. Jacob had already had an unfortunate experience with Trixie Bennett. When he saw the orderly in the room with a disinfectant sponge in his hands, the rich woman had angrily remarked, "And what is this man doing here? He's a 2-meter tall kid, and he's still walking around the wards with a sponge. Why couldn't he find a better job? I'd rather be a doorman in a restaurant than hang around here and warm my ears on other people's conversations." "I'm not warming my ears. And anyway, I want to be a doctor. I'm working as an orderly to get some experience," Jacob said nonchalantly, though he was actually seething with anger. Trixie grinned wryly. "A doctor? Yeah, only a hillbilly would go to a doctor like you. But it's better for you. At least you'll get to see your soulmate." That was a low blow. Jacob's cheeks flushed crimson, but he restrained himself and left the room. He knew that marriages like Bennett's were doomed. The wife was 17 years younger than her husband. It didn't seem a big deal. Love is all ages. But the reality is actually much harsher than that naive quote. And now this one's going to get hers. What the hell is Stephen thinking, Jacob thought, trying not to cross his eyes with Edward Green, who had passed by. "What are you doing here?" "Overhearing, I suppose," the doctor asked with a smirk. "No, of course not, Edward. How could you think that?" "I'm him, Bennett. His laundry is fresh, Jacob said evasively. Well, go on then. Just don't bother the poor guy for nothing. Okay. His wife came to see me yesterday. What's her name? Violetta. No, Trixie definitely asked for my help. But not for free, of course, but for a small fee. You know what I'm saying? I do, Edward. Okay, I'll go, Jacob replied, his stomach twitching at the unpleasant suggestion. She's a hard worker, Edward snarled, and walked slowly down the hall. Jacob's mood soured. It was all because of Edward. All he did was talk and gossip. Jacob felt sorry for Bennett, though. When the orderly entered his room, he smiled sweetly, so that the man wouldn't guess anything. But the businessman realized it with some sixth sense. Jacob was here. I've missed you, my friend. Sometimes I think that you're the only one of all the people around me who doesn't benefit from my passing. The orderly was embarrassed. Come on, Stephen, you still have a long way to go. And no one benefits from your departure. Not your doctors, not your subordinates, not your wife. Come on, Jacob. I get it. You're not a little kid. Everybody benefits except you. Your wife gets the inheritance and the doctor gets the experience. You know I'm in a tough spot, don't you? I'll pay the notary to draw up a will. You alone are not interested in this, sadly whispered the businessman. But there was one person in my life whom I loved and respected very much. Why are you talking about him in the past tense? Jacob couldn't help himself. Tears glistened in Stephen's eyes. She's not alive. Yes, she is. It was my fault. She was killed in an accident. Car went off the bridge, went under the ice. They never recovered her body. They say the currents underwater are strong. They promised they'd find her when the ice went down. They never did. Jacob bit his lip painfully. I'm sorry, Stephen. I didn't know. What can I say? What could I say? I even wanted to make a will in her favor. Now I have to do it with my wife. It's been 6 months since my student passed away. Here's a photo to remember her by. Look how beautiful she is. The businessman said with undisguised pride and handed it to the orderly. Jacob was looking at a pleasant young woman in her early 20s, bold, with gray eyes and a pleasant face. At that moment, something clicked in the young orderly's mind. The photograph fell out of his hands, and he pressed his back against the wall to keep his balance. Jacob, are you all right? Why are you looking so pale? But he didn't hear the businessman's last remark. The most important thing was that Jacob had seen this girl before, not 6 months ago, but a few hours earlier, without wanting to. Jacob had traveled back a couple months to a time when he hadn't even known Stephen. He had no idea that he ever would. The orderly's life began in a small village 100 kilometers from a major population center. The inquisitive boy was the son of simple laborers of the fields and from childhood was interested in medicine. Jacob often watched the work of the village paramedic and helped him with medical procedures, dreaming of someday becoming a qualified specialist like him. As soon as Jacob came of age, he immediately joined the nearest large hospital, where he became an orderly. His tasks included many things: cleaning the rooms, keeping them clean and orderly, and assisting the medical staff in transporting patients around the ward. Although the work of the orderlies seemed somewhat monotonous to everyone else, Jacob enjoyed every moment he spent in the clinic. He was also grateful to fate for the opportunity to help people and watch the doctors work from the inside. Every day he worked hard, trying to learn as much as he could about medicine. But for all his dedication to his work, Jacob never forgot his dream of becoming a doctor. Until late at night he read books, studied anatomy and biology. And even when he was at work, he tried to learn from doctors and asked questions whenever he could. Every day Jacob's dream grew closer. He knew the road to his dream would be hard and long, but he didn't give up. Now he would go to university, and he would be a doctor right away. Frankly speaking, Jacob was sure that if he worked harder and kept at it, his dream would come true. But the orderly couldn't hold his luck by its slippery tail, having failed the entrance exams. Now Jacob had only work to do, nothing more. The critical care unit is not a place for the faint of heart. It was not a place to show indecision or weakness, as Jacob had been taught by his predecessor, Eden. In every situation, the patient must see a staff member who is confident in the success of the treatment. But I'm not a doctor, and I'm not involved in treatment. I'm just a helper cleaning, transporting patients, Jacob objected. At such times, Eden smiled meaningfully and said, "That's where you're wrong, colleague. It's not as simple as you think. You're a cog in a well-organized machine that is designed to help the patient. And imagine that this cog is out of order. What happens then? That's right, a breakdown. And we cannot break down. You understand? Who's going to help the sick?" Jacob didn't usually like to argue, so he easily agreed with Eden. Especially since there was no point. They were doing the same thing, after all, and they wanted to be good employees. Idan was Jacob's father, but he asked to be called by his first name. At first, the young orderly was embarrassed and uncomfortable. The man was much older, after all. He couldn't just poke him like that. But then he got used to it, especially since the work was hard and did not tolerate sentimentality. All I could hear from all sides: Smith, help with the transportation of the patient. Smith, get the laundry from the laundry room. Smith, take out the garbage. You're on your feet all day. Sometimes I don't have time to sit down. It was good with Eden, though. He had a way of setting things up so that the orderlies didn't have to do too much. But Eden wasn't lazy, not at all. He just preferred to conserve his energy and not waste it where he could do without it. Jacob, who had lost his father when he was still a child, saw him as a mentor and a comrade. He probably wouldn't have stayed in the ward if it hadn't been for Eden's help. He would have run away in a week. But the wise orderly found the right words, explained what was going on. Just be a human being, Jacob. And don't divide the patients into poor and rich. It happens that the poorest tramp will turn out to be a kindest fellow, and a rich man, on the contrary, will show himself as if he had cured himself with the help of money. Of course, where without them? So don't let greed and anger into your heart, my friend. It's not worth it. Oh, it's not worth it. Eden's words were true for all time. And remembering them now, Jacob couldn't hold back the tears. Eden had been divorced for a long time and lived alone with his dog Jack, a huge mongrel with kind eyes and a brave heart. The dog was intelligent and always looked forward to his master's return from work with great anticipation. Eden really disliked the night shift, as he knew that the pet missed him and would sit at the door with a sad look. But as soon as the owner entered the house, everything changed in the opposite direction. Jack started jumping around Eden, trying to get him off his feet and lick his tongue. Jacob had witnessed it a couple of times and was genuinely surprised at the dog's devotion. Eden smiled, always saying that Jack was waiting for him, no matter what. But one fateful evening, the dog never waited for his master. The news that Eden had been attacked by unknown assailants in the park took Jacob by surprise. What do you mean? Attacked. But he'd never done anything wrong. He was almost impossible to pick a fight with. What about a fight or a conflict? Department head Kiran shook his head. Well, I don't know exactly what happened. But Eden was found in the morning. Stab wounds, one in the arm. Apparently defending himself, the other fatal went through the heart. No money, of course, but his pockets had been thoroughly cleaned out. Anyway, he's in the morgue now. Eden's got no family. His ex-wife is gone, and she doesn't need him to take care of the funeral. So it's all on us. I've put together a fundraiser to raise as much as we can. Plus the head doctor said he'd give us some money from the fund. Jacob didn't hear the last words of the head doctor, because he couldn't realize that his older friend was no longer alive. How could that be? Just yesterday we were chatting, laughing at another joke and discussing the last soccer game. And then some murderers cut short the life of such a good man. God, how could this be possible? The realization of the terrible truth took Jacob by surprise. Understanding his state of mind, the superintendent added, "Oh, I almost forgot, Jacob. Why don't you go to the morgue, okay? Eden has been identified, of course, but you were the one who had the most contact with him. Why don't you look through some of his personal effects and see what's missing? Well, it'll help the cops, they'll put it on the APB. It will be easier to find the bandits." The superintendent added as he walked away. Jacob shuddered and looked at him blankly. "Yes, of course, I'll be sure to come by. Kiran, don't worry." He wanted to scream, but how could it be? Why had life been so cruel to Eden? Did he deserve this? Jacob didn't have an answer to that question. And who could give it to him? Criminals. They'd have to be caught. In the meantime, look for the wind. The visit to the morgue left a lasting impression on Jacob. He'd been there before, of course, but those visits had all been work-related. This was the first time he'd had to visit a friend of his mentor's. When he saw the body lying on the table, covered with a sheet, the orderly bit his lip. The deceased seemed so small and thin, as if the once healthy man had suddenly shrunk in size. When he saw Jacob, the elderly pathologist stepped closer. "I'm sorry about Eden. He was a good man, right, Fair? The last thing I expected was to see him here." A tear rolled down Jacob's cheek. I didn't feel like talking. He didn't want to say anything, especially since words couldn't change the situation, and time couldn't go backwards. On the other hand, Jacob had come here to help look through the dead man's things. He clenched his fists when he saw the bloody shirt with the distinctive tear in the chest area. At first glance, there was nothing special among the things. Well, Eden's usual clothes, a loose-fitting shirt, slacks and old-fashioned shoes, a purse. The late orderly didn't recognize purses and always carried his money in the back pocket of his pants. Naturally, it wasn't there. What else could Eden have had on him? An old cell phone? No, it's right there. Apparently, the raiders didn't want to mess with that cheap model, since it was almost impossible to get anything for it from the fence. But think, Jacob, think. What else did Eden have? The orderly puzzled for a long time. Then he turned and looked at the wrist of Eden's left hand. A watch. That's it. Why didn't I think of that right away? Eden had a watch. The pathologist looked at Jacob in surprise. No, there was no watch. That's what I remember. And it's not in the inventory. The boy's face brightened. Eden's watch was unusual, the kind of watch that attracted the eye. Elegant and simple at the same time. Eden had said something about buying it at a flea market from some vagrant for a penny. The watch looked to be about 40 years old. But that didn't bother the orderly at all. On the contrary, he wore them practically without taking them off. The main thing is that they tell the time correctly, Eden said. And it's no big deal if the strap needs to be worn. It doesn't make it any worse. Jacob nodded, unaware that it wouldn't be long before the watch would become evidence in a high-profile crime. A watch, you say? That's good. Did you sketch out a description on a piece of paper? I'll call the police myself, the pathologist said, eager to help. Jacob nodded. Then he walked over to Eden, who was lying on the table, and touched his hand gently in farewell. The dead man's skin was cold, reminding him that his friend would never come back. The funeral and all the subsequent mourning events passed like a dream for Jacob. The attendant had not forgotten about Eden's pet Jackie, who had been orphaned in an instant. Jacob looked sadly into the dog's eyes as he entered his deceased companion's house and realized that he knew everything. How had the dog realized it? No one could say for sure, but tears flowed from his eyes. The gray hair on his face was wet, making it glisten in the light. Jacob stood there, unable to believe his eyes. He hadn't realized before that animals could be so painfully affected by the passing of their owners. Jackie stood there, whimpering softly, trying to touch Jacob with his paw. It looked as if the dog were trying to get the guest to be honest with him. As if to say, it's not true, is it? My boss is just late at work, on his second shift. Or maybe he's sick and in the hospital. I'll wait for him, no problem. There was hope in the dog's eyes. But Jacob shook his head dolefully. What could he say when his heart was deeply wounded? Oh, Eden. Eden. Why didn't you take care of yourself? Why did you go home through the park? In the evening, Jacob thought wistfully. It's a shame about the dog. He won't make it. He'll get homesick in the shelter, he'll wither away. As if to confirm his words, Jackie whimpered and pawed impatiently. I'm sorry, I'll tell it like it is. Your master died. There was nothing to be done. I just found out myself. We're organizing the funeral now, Jacob told the dog like a human. Jackie listened with his head tilted to the side, catching every word he said. The sight of his tears made Jacob's heart ache. At that moment, he made a final and irrevocable decision. No, my friend, you're not going to the orphanage. You're going to live with me. I'm sure Eden would want you to, Jacob whispered, taking Jackie gently by the collar. To his surprise, the dog didn't resist, and he was passive. He seemed to be ready to follow his master at any moment, his life cut short so abruptly. "It's all right. Be patient. It hurts too, but we must be strong." "There's no other way to be strong in a case like this," Jacob whispered, stroking the dog's withers. Jackie had been living with him ever since. Even though Jacob didn't take the dog to his best friend's funeral, he still came running to the cemetery. As it turned out later, the attendant made this escape by jumping out of a broken window and scratching the door with his claws. When the dog approached the coffin, which stood on a small pedestal, he sat down on his hind legs and raised his muzzle upward. At the same time, there was a rumble of thunder, and Jackie gave a long howl. The neighboring grandmother of the deceased, who was standing a little farther away, immediately began to baptize, and the crowd, who saw the orderly off to his last journey, said, "Look, he's grieving. It's just like a man to grieve." Jacob's eyes brimmed with tears. He had never seen such a sad scene before, nor had he ever buried a friend so young. More than once, Jackie had run away from home to visit his late master in the cemetery. The dog always came back, as if realizing that he was forever bound by his friendship with Jacob. At first, the young sanitation worker was very worried, afraid that the pet would not be hit by a car or not become a victim of the employees for catching stray animals. One day, Jacob even came to the cemetery to talk to the caretaker and find out how Jackie behaves in his absence. When he heard the dog's story, the older man nodded sympathetically. "Don't worry, he's a well-mannered dog. The first time I saw him, I knew right away. The poor dog is pining. He's only at one grave. I was a little scared at first, especially when he came at night. Then I got used to it. An animal is like a human being. It has its own soul. Where there's a soul, there are feelings. Thank you for your help and understanding. Jackie wouldn't hurt a fly. Not if he's never been hurt before," Jacob said, hardly able to contain his excitement. The dog came to Eden's grave for about 2 months, but then he got over it and stopped running away. Jacob could finally breathe a sigh of relief. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to keep track of the dog and he'd get into trouble. And that had happened once, when Jackie was attacked by a pack of hungry stray dogs. They lived in a pack at the city dump, like wolves, with their own hierarchy and leader. Apparently, he didn't like a well-groomed house dog. Several large dogs of unknown breed surrounded Jackie in the back alley and began to slowly squeeze the ring. Jacob's pet was lucky that day, for a woman vagrant had interceded. When she saw a pack of angry dogs, the stranger did not hesitate and grabbed a stick and rushed into the thick of the fray. Ironically, it was only a couple hundred meters from Jacob's house, which always caught his attention. He'd just gotten home from work and was surprised by the shouts coming from the alley. Perhaps if Jacob hadn't gotten there in time, Jackie and his protector would have been in trouble. He'd shown up just as the initiative had shifted to the side of the angry pack of stray dogs. When they saw the adult man, the strays tucked their tails and slowly backed away. "Let's get out of here now. Get out of here," Jacob shouted, earning a nod of approval from the stranger. 5 minutes later, it was over. The attackers had fled, and Jackie's defenders were free to breathe. "Thank you. You got here just in time, or they would have torn the dog a little more," she said, breathing hard. Jacob smiled. "Come on. It's my friend. Or rather, my dead comrade. He often runs away from home." "There you are in the story," the stranger smiled. "Yes, I see. My name is Trixie. If anything, I've settled down in an abandoned house, moved some furniture, cleaned it up. It's livable." Only now, looking at his companion, did Jacob realize that he'd been right in his initial conclusions. The girl stood before him, dressed in old, tattered clothes. Her long hair was tied back in a ponytail, and her face knew no makeup. But despite that, Trixie's eyes had an unquenchable spark of life in them. "And I, Jacob, I live around here. Why don't you come in for tea? After a fight like this, it would be good." Trixie thought for a moment, then a sweet smile lit up her face. "Why, I wouldn't mind. Especially since Jackie probably wouldn't mind either. His tail is wagging." Jacob smiled back and walked toward the house with his new acquaintance. Trixie's footsteps were so light that it looked as if she were floating above the ground. Her skin was tan, and her arms were scratched from a fight with stray dogs. In the conversation that ensued, Trixie struck Jacob as intelligent and educated. She could read and write, though she had no place of her own. Trixie was a free bird at heart, unwilling to live in a cage of stereotypes. Listening to her pleasant voice, Jacob was literally enchanted by the encounter. Jackie liked his new acquaintance, too, who had taken the risk of standing up for him against all odds. She was a strange girl, full of romantic contradictions. Every once in a while, Jacob glanced at her out of the corner of his eye and couldn't help but smile. "Oh, this is a nice little house you've got here. It's cozy. And it's quiet," Trixie said as she stepped over the threshold. An embarrassed blush broke out on Jacob's cheeks. "It's my late grandmother's house, actually. I used to spend my summer vacations here when I was a kid." As if to confirm his words, Jackie barked loudly and wagged his broom-like tail. "What do you want, tea or coffee?" Jacob asked, coming into the kitchen. "I'll have tea, if I can, with 1 spoonful of sugar," Trixie said, her eyes downcast and glancing anxiously out the window. The weather had been hinting at rain since morning, bringing clouds overhead. Lightning zigzagged across the sky like the spears of the mythical warriors of Olympus. When she saw Jacob fumbling with the kettle, Trixie decided to take matters into her own hands. "Let me make it myself. Trust me, I know how." "Yes, of course you do. I'd appreciate it," Jacob mumbled confusedly. At that moment, the guest seemed mysterious and beautiful, while he was the epitome of sternness and seriousness. The girl set the old wooden table in a flash. She set down 2 elegant cups and a tray with the scones she had bought earlier. Outside the window there was another rumble of thunder, and the first drops of rain drummed on the roof. "We got in just in time. You can get wet in this weather," Trixie said. They sat down at the table and, listening to the rain outside the window, began to enjoy the silence in each other's company. At their feet was the faithful Jackie, whose ears perked up whenever there was another clap of thunder outside the window. They sat in silence for a moment. And then Jacob pulled a vase of candy from the cabinet and handed it to Trixie. "Thank you, you're very hospitable," she said with a smile, watching Jacob's distracted gaze. "Yeah, well, you can say that too. Thank you. If it weren't for you, I'd be without Jackie. I can't afford that. A friend wouldn't understand. I believe that Igor is watching me from heaven, even now," Jacob said eagerly. Trixie said something offhandedly, and then they got into a lively conversation about life, death, honor, and loyalty, and anything else that seemed to interest them both. The only thing Trixie was silent about was her past. For some inexplicable reason, she stubbornly avoided the subject, trying to avoid it like an experienced navigator avoids underwater reefs. And if in the first few minutes of their acquaintance the young people had thought they couldn't find common topics to talk about, at that moment they realized that their hearts sounded in unison, like the strings of a majestic violin. As Trixie and Jacob drank the last cup of tea and ate almost all the scones, they smiled at each other as if they had just exchanged their deepest secrets. Suddenly, the rain outside the window stopped just as it had started. The clear blue sky with the rays of the bright sun broke through the gray clouds, showing the residents the way to happiness with its bright light. "Thanks for the pleasant company, Jacob. Maybe we'll see each other again sometime." "I have to go now," Trixie said, holding out her small hand to him. "Yes, of course, I'd always be happy to. Come back anytime you want. Especially since Jackie knows you, recognizes you as her own," Jacob said with a smile. Trixie nodded, waving goodbye and closing the door behind her. Jacob stared out the window for a long time after she left, enjoying the rainbow. Since then, the young men had been seeing each other almost daily. Despite being a maverick, Trixie was adept at many things, including gardening and computers. And while Jacob could still come up with a more or less coherent explanation, Trixie's second preference frankly stumped him. "How do you know all these programs?" he asked. Trixie just waved it away. "I don't. It's just in my mind." Jacob shook his head. "But you went to school somewhere, didn't you? High school, college, university. I'm sure that's where you learned your skills." Trixie's remark made an indelible impression. Her face suddenly turned pale and her lips trembled. "What's the matter? Are you sick? Jacob asked anxiously. No, I'm fine. I just should have told you sooner. I don't remember my past, you know. Jacob's face was puzzled. What do you mean you don't remember? What do you mean you don't remember? Trixie nodded sadly. Not at all. 6 months ago, I woke up in a back alley with a broken head and grief. No passport, no ID. Thanks to some vagrants who came out and kept me from freezing in the street. Have you tried going to the police? It's an assault, a crime, Jacob exclaimed. Of course I did. But no one took my story seriously. No, they didn't send me away, of course, but they promised to look into it. In the meantime, they gave me the address of a rehabilitation center for people in difficult situations. But I stayed there for a couple of days and ran away. I've been on the streets ever since, Trixie said, embarrassed. What about your name? Why, I'll get a passport when I remember my name and surname. Well, the vagrants have already christened me Trixie. I don't mind, as long as it's in good conscience. Good people will always help, share the last of their money if they need it, Trixie said. Jacob remembered the words of his late friend Eden, who'd always said the same thing. No, I'm not stupid, I just need to figure myself out. What if I really am a vagrant and have been living on the streets since I was a little girl? What then? Why mess with the police and social services? What about the head injury? And your skills? I don't think street kids know how to use computers, Jacob said. Trixie smiled. Okay, your take, I agree. This whole thing seems pretty weird. Let's put that question to rest. I mean, basically I could have been hit over the head by one of the majors. And you don't know how our brother is disliked. Jacob replied that the confession hadn't come easily to her. It wasn't surprising, because she'd been through so much. He gently put his arm around Trixie's shoulders and added, Don't worry, everything will work out. And move in with me. It'll be safer that way. I don't want those who attacked you to finish what they started. Trixie gave him a look of gratitude and tenderness. Jacob's heart beat even harder. He touched her cheek with his lips and pulled away, expecting a slap. But he didn't, of course, because Trixie was feeling the same way he was. After that memorable conversation, they never parted. Jacob presented Trixie to everyone as a girl from a normal family, without emphasizing her current situation. What was the big deal? Basically, anyone could be in Trixie's shoes. So, as the saying goes, judge not, but be not judged. Especially since Jacob's personal life wasn't really anyone's business. His father had passed away years ago, and his mother lived in the village, where she and Jacob's sister and her family kept the farm and worked on the poultry farm. It was Jacob who dreamed of medicine from childhood and went to the big city. In the provinces, he was literally short of air and could not realize himself, although there was plenty of work. It was possible, for example, to go to the mechanics or tractor drivers on the farm, or a driver for an old truck during the harvest. Such professions were in great demand. But Jacob's heart wasn't in machinery. In his youth, of course, he raced with his father and peers, first on a moped, then on motorcycles. But he never got beyond that innocent hobby. Jacob didn't know anything about engines, and repairing a tractor seemed to him to be a dense forest. Because of this, the village kids teased him with white knuckle. But Jacob did not give up and immediately got into a fight. His mother cried and begged him to come to his senses, applying cold to the bruises on his son's face. But Jacob always defended his opinion to the end, and by the time he graduated from high school, he had made it clear to everyone that it would be more expensive to offend him. So the local youth recognized him and understood his decision to leave. Later, Jacob never regretted it, and even though he did not enter medical school, he still connected his life with medicine. Jacob belonged to that breed of people who let everything pass through them, the pain of patience, their sadness and despair. He understood Trixie's hidden confusion, too. She woke up every day surrounded by dust and the smell of dirt. Trixie was a girl with no past who had lost her memory in a gruesome attack. It pained Jacob that his new acquaintance had no memory of who she was or where she came from, or how she came from, or how she ended up here in the first place. The only thing Trixie knew for sure before she met him was that she was alone. She has to fight to survive, to find food and a roof over her head. Even in this fight, though, Trixie believed that somewhere out there was real life and true love. Thoughts of that flashed through Jacob's mind like a blink of an eye. Eden's death and his meeting with Trixie had changed his life beyond recognition. Time had flown by. Work, home, work, and on and on. Trixie decided to investigate the mystery of her past and turned to her brothers, who had found her on the street 6 months earlier. Jacob had been skeptical at first, but there's no telling what could have happened, and homeless people rarely have good memories. But when the orderly came home from work, he was in for a surprise. Trixie greeted him in the hallway, looking radiant. "Jacob, I found out something. Can you believe it?" The boy raised an eyebrow in surprise. "What is it? Don't keep me in suspense." Trixie smiled. And here's what the homeless, it turns out, took my jacket for themselves. It was warm, like a down jacket. "That's a good start. You're about to find out that they robbed you," Jacob said, grudgingly. No, let me tell you. They didn't rob me. They took my jacket out of desperation. The poor girl had twins in it. Can you believe it? So they gave me my down jacket, and they gave me a vatnik. But the most interesting thing turned out later. In the pocket of my jacket was a photograph and a camera, Trixie said mysteriously. Jacob gasped in amazement. "Wow, I told you you weren't homeless. But where did you get such riches? Why didn't they say so in the first place?" Trixie thought for a moment, as if mentally making excuses for her homelessness, then said, "They were embarrassed. It's like they took someone else's. But I shared my shelter with them. I became my own. If I was a rich man, they'd never have told me about it. They even gave me a picture. The camera's a little more complicated. They pawned it. They needed the money badly. But the main thing is the picture. There's a girl with some guy. You wouldn't happen to know them, would you?" Jacob took the photograph in his hands and scrutinized the faces in it. "No, I don't know them. I think it's better to go to the police with them or to the search volunteers. Let them quote the photo on social networks." And so on, Jacob said frustratedly. Trixie shook her head and put the picture away in her desk drawer. Truth be told, she had hoped Jacob would be able to recognize the couple, but she'd failed miserably in that endeavor. But what happened just a couple days later was something no one could have predicted. Looking at the picture given to him by Stephen, the sick businessman, Jacob felt a strange sense of déjà vu. "I've seen this picture before. It's the same one Trixie showed me, for Christ's sake, except the guy wasn't in it. But that didn't change the point." A shiver of nervousness ran down Jacob's spine, and he felt the vapor on his forehead. "Jesus, what is this?" "Trixie knew your daughter," Jacob whispered, coming to his senses. Stephen frowned. "Buddy, what are you talking about? Who's Trixie? I don't know any Trixie. You must be confused." Jacob's face brightened. "No, Stephen, I'm not. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. I'm just going to call my girlfriend, and you'll see." The businessman looked at the orderly with disapproval. "What's he got in mind? The notary will be here any minute, and there's some kind of photo mess going on." But Jacob was unstoppable. Not long ago, he'd given Trixie an inexpensive smartphone for communication, so he could call any time he wanted. "Trixie? I have a huge favor to ask of you. Come to my office. You know where I am?" Yeah. Clinical 1. You ask for Smith and I'll be paged right away. Nurse on duty. Make sure you bring a picture of me. You know, the one you showed me. Okay, I'll be waiting." Jacob's offer really intrigued Trixie, so she didn't hesitate and set off at once. Stephen, on the other hand, was thinking about something else. "How is it that you live? You save up money, and as a result you don't even have anyone to leave it all to. Trixie, who if not her? It's not like she's giving it away to the foundations. I mean, it's the same here. My wife will put up a nice monument after she dies instead of thanking me. What about strangers? They need me. It's a pity my DG left before her time. And why did I have to suffer so much?" Tears sprang from the businessman's eyes. Sadness and longing took possession of him completely. In Stephen's opinion, there was only one thing left for him to do to make a will and leave his life in a dignified manner. without sinking to the level of a decrepit, infirm old man who had to be cared for by his beautiful young wife. To Jacob's great joy, Trixie arrives at the clinic ahead of Trixie and the family notary. "Where are we going? And why are you so worried?" Trixie asked in surprise. Jacob smiled, then graciously opened the door to room 7. If only he'd known what would follow. When he saw the girl in the doorway, dressed in a simple, casual outfit and slip-on shoes, Stephen's anger boiled over. "How dare you come here? And insolent. You take a deposit, and then you disappear. Until I called the police." Jacob was instantly hot. Frankly, he'd expected a very different reaction from a sick businessman. Anything but that. Tears glistened in Trixie's eyes. Still not realizing what was happening, she sank to her knees and clutched her head. "Stephen, what's the matter?" "Do you two know each other?" exclaimed the uncomprehending orderly. The businessman sharply rubbed the air with his palm. "You still have the nerve to ask that? Do we know each other?" "Yes, of course we do. After all, it was me who hired this bloodhound to make inquiries about my daughter. 6 months ago, she took some money up front, took some pictures and disappeared. And then my DG died. I didn't need her anymore. How's it going?" "My journalist from the neighboring region. Trixie Samoylova, right?" Now it was Jacob's turn to be surprised. At that moment, almost everything became clear to him: the camera in Trixie's jacket pocket, and the picture of DG in an embrace with a man. It turned out that the businessman had hired a journalist to spy on his daughter, who had a new fiancé. The stakeout promised to be the most ordinary case on Trixie's record. But then, apparently, things didn't go according to plan. Hearing her real first and last name, Kate groaned at the pain that squeezed the back of her head. The temporary amnesia stretched on for a long 6 months. Finally, it receded and Trixie was able to realize what had happened. Raising her tear-stained face to the businessman, Kate exclaimed, "Your daughter didn't die in the car accident. She was not in that car, and in general it's all one big, well-played show. I followed her right up to the point where she stopped at the bridge and met some guy. And then someone hit me in the head and I blacked out. I don't remember anything else. But what I do know for sure is that your daughter wasn't in that car." "What do you mean, she wasn't?" "Then how did the car end up in the river?" Bennett backtracked. At that moment, he realized that Trixie didn't seem to be lying, especially after she showed the purple scar under her hair at the back of her head. "No, I'm not making any will today. Not until I find my DG. Dead or alive. You hear me?" "Dead or alive," the businessman shouted with all his might and reached for the telephone on the nightstand. A moment later, to Jacob's relief, Bennett had given the family notary the go-ahead, causing him genuine joy. Trixie, on the other hand, was ready to hurl. In her mind, she was already a wealthy heiress, but in reality, she'd been beaten around the bend by an orderly and a vagrant. When Trixie finally recovered from a couple of shots administered by the nurse on duty, she remembered a few curious details. For several days, she had been following DG, who was enjoying life in the arms of a handsome stranger. Trixie didn't know his name, and when she got close to him, there was an attack followed by memory loss. Luckily, he was captured in the very photograph Trixie had brought with her. Looking at the picture, Stephen clutched at his heart. "My God, that's Trixie's cousin. What's his name?" "Eugene, I think it's Eugene Smith. But how could that be possible? Him and my DG." "But Eugene just got in from some godforsaken town a week ago, and he never said a word about knowing my daughter. I told him so much about her." The ex-journalist's brain began to work with renewed vigor. The situation was extremely unpleasant and dangerous. Most likely Eugene and Trixie were not related, but were conspiring to ruin the Bennett family. But then where is DG at this moment? Dr. Ben came into the room and ordered, "All right, what's this gathering? Everybody out of here. Stephen, we can't wait any longer. We start prepping you for surgery today. The labs are screaming for surgery now or never. There is no alternative and there will never be." Tears glistened in the businessman's eyes. "But what about my will if I leave? What will happen to my assets? Who will protect my company and business?" The doctor bit his lip painfully. "Stephen, I'm sorry, but now is not the time to talk about this. For my part, I'll do my best to make sure you don't need notaries or a will. Remember about it in about 20 years. The businessman sighed sadly and, waving his hand doomfully, agreed to the surgical intervention. Well, to die, so to die with music. Trixie wasted no time and went to the police. But now she was no longer a vagrant who had lost her memory, but a journalist who had been assassinated 6 months ago. Trixie's testimony had caused a sensation at the police station. And it was primarily due to the fact that Eugene Smith had a twin brother, Pete, of whom even Trixie Bannett was unaware. Of course, there were no family ties between the rich man's wife and the Smith brothers. It turned out to be as simple as anything ingenious. Trixie herself went to Eugene Smith with a request to eliminate her stepdaughter. There had long been bad rumors about the boys in the business circles of the city. Stephen's wife's calculations were simple. She quickly realized that her husband had not long to live, which meant that the most pressing issue would be the inheritance. Yes, the very inheritance that D.G. Smith was supposed to receive. But when the businessman's daughter died in a car accident, the circle closed, and at its center, for lack of other heirs, was Trixie, in person. For this purpose, Kate secretly introduced D.G. to Eugene, who was known as an incorrigible Don Juan and seducer. How many women's hearts conquered this scoundrel? No one really knew. However, Trixie was not really interested in it, because Eugene was busy in several other criminal projects, and he involved his twin brother Pete. Pete was a kind and naive guy who wasn't tainted by crime. It was Pete that D.G. had been dating all along. And when Eugene decided to get rid of D.G., there was a rift between the brothers. Eugene demanded to give him the girl, while Pete defended her and asked to keep her alive. It was this scene that Trixie captured on her camera. She was then attacked by Eugene's second handmaiden, who was watching the situation from the side through the lens of powerful binoculars. Unfortunately, the unconscious journalist did not know or see the main point. When an altercation arose between the Smith brothers, Eugene stabbed Pete in the back, hitting his nerve endings. He was never able to finish off his own brother, nor was he able to finish the job with D.G. Still, the bond that exists between the twins prevented Eugene from going on a killing spree and kept him from doing something irreparable. What to do with D.G. and his wounded brother? The way out was suggested by a friend, who offered to take the loving couple out into the wilderness and settle in a cabin in the woods. The scoundrel's calculation was correct. Still in love with Pete Smith, D.G. could not leave him with a wound in the back. And even if she had, she could not have gotten out of the woods alone, for the cabin was surrounded on all sides by impassable swamps. In essence, it was isolation, house arrest in a criminal way. And to be more precise, the criminals had miscalculated in only one way. During those 6 months, D.G. and Pete had grown so fond of each other that they were practically inseparable. The wound on the boy's back healed, but he couldn't walk. All this time, D.G. had been caring for him, making lotions and compresses from whatever was at hand. Before she knew it, she had learned to fish in a small pond when she found a safe path in the marshes. Once a month, Eugene brought food and medicine to the cabin in the woods, hoping that Stephen would die soon and leave everything to his wife Trixie. Thus, by the will of an evil fate, Pete and D.G. became hermits. They've been through a lot of hardships. It may seem unreal. But one day they were attacked by a pack of wolves, driven out into the swamp by a forest fire that cornered them in their ramshackle cabin. D.G. cried unceasingly, and Pete, taking a knife in one hand and a bundle of freshly caught fish in the other, crawled out over the threshold. "No, Pete. No, stop. Don't," cried D.G. in tears. But Pete was inexorable. Looking into the eyes of the leader of the gray predators, he tossed him the bundle of fish and prepared for the worst. The man knew perfectly well that the cabin would not withstand the onslaught of fierce wolves, and if Pete sacrificed himself, D.G. might survive. The forest fire had already died down, which meant the wolves would soon be out of the swamp. The leader growled and slowly approached Pete, who was lying on the ground. He couldn't walk because of the spinal nerve injured by his brother's blow. For the same reason, Pete could only move his arms and wriggle like an earthworm. The still snarling wolf came almost close. D.G. was crying in the cabin, praying to the image of the Mother of God hanging on the wall, and Pete was clutching the hilt of his knife until his fingers ached. Whatever it was, he wouldn't give his life for nothing. But for some reason, the wolf hesitated. Seeing the determination in his victim's eyes, he hesitated visibly, especially when at his paws lay a bundle of fish. which in the conditions of hunger is quite suitable for a trophy. Let this man live, the wolf retreated as if he were convinced of his own rightness. It is hard to say why he did not dare to attack the man. Perhaps it was Pete's offering that confused him. Or maybe the forest predator was surprised by the bravery of the paralyzed man, who went to any lengths to save the girl he loved. Half an hour later, the wolves left the swamps. Pete and Digi hugged each other and cried quietly. The shock and fear of being killed far away from their native places was the result of the shock they had experienced. All this came to light a little later, when Eugene Smith's gang was apprehended, and his wounded brother and Digi were released from the captivity of the cabin on the marshes. Subsequently, the journalist Trixie made a wonderful report about this story, which gave a start to its triumphant return to TV screens and internet portals. But Stephen learned that his daughter was alive, not immediately. For about a week, doctors were afraid to let visitors to him, fearing secondary infections, which under certain conditions could not contain anything. But when DG appeared on the threshold of the ward, the businessman could not restrain muffled sobs. For 6 long months he had thought his daughter dead. Kate had been living in the middle of nowhere all that time at the fault of her stepmother and her lover Eugene Smith. "Well, hello, Papa. It's so good to see you recovering," said DG. "And you didn't believe me yet." "I told you everything would be fine," sobbed Digi. The father was stunned. The businessman was literally out of breath. Then he could only sniffle softly and wipe his eyes with a handkerchief. "Don't swear, please. But I'm marrying Pete. Trust me, he's a real man. I'll never find anyone better than him," Digi announced. When her father came to his senses, Stephen had a smile of joy on his lips. "I don't mind, do I? I'm all for it. A week ago I was preparing to die, making a will, and today I receive an invitation to my daughter's wedding." As Jacob and Trixie watched this touching scene, Jacob and Trixie couldn't hold back the tears. The events they experienced were so amazing that after the media coverage they resonated deeply with the community. Trixie's ratings as an aspiring journalist skyrocketed, and Jacob received a promotion at work with the future prospect of attending medical school. Trixie, Eugene and his accomplices were convicted, with a solid sentence to be served in one of the country's northern prisons. As it turned out later, Eugene had another crime on his record, and it had been solved thanks to a single detail: a watch taken from the hand of the mortally wounded Corman Eden. It was a watch Jacob would recognize among hundreds of thousands of others, for he had seen it more than once, which meant Eugene was doomed. Neither a good lawyer nor the simulation of mental illness that he had skillfully tried to feign in the courtroom had helped him. Pete, on the other hand, was acquitted on all counts, because his cunning brother had taken advantage of his naivete and simple-mindedness. Many of those who were at the court hearing marveled at how different the twin brothers were in fact. Eugene evil and greedy, and Pete, on the contrary, kind and generous. Complete opposites. 2 months after the trial, Pete and Digi got married. By that time, the guy had undergone a series of corrective surgeries on his spine, giving him hope for a complete cure. True, at the wedding Pete was still in a wheelchair, as doctors strictly forbade him any load. However, the groom was not discouraged, because next to such a beautiful bride, he was ready to be an invalid for the rest of his life. Deciding to follow her husband, the wife saw him getting on the wrong train and hopped on. "Mom, Dad, I want you to meet my boyfriend. Or rather, already with my fiancé," Emily said one evening when they were sitting together at dinner. Susan gasped. "Emily, how so? How long have you been dating him? And you haven't even said a word to us. It's all secret, all secret, all secret." "Mom, but why not? We've been dating for a while," Emily replied. "Michael came to see me with an injury. Anyway, it's been 2 months now, but the intentions are serious for both of us." "Daughter." "Congratulations to you," pronounced the father, who had been silent until then. "And when you had time to grow up, I didn't even notice. Time has flown by so quickly. You've graduated from the University of Medicine, you've begun to work, and now you're almost a bride." "Yes," said the mother thoughtfully. "I want a family like yours." "You've always been perfect for me," Emily said. "You talk to each other a lot, still write messages to each other. Respectful to my brother and me, among others. I even gave you guys as an example to Michael and told him that you were the standard of a perfect relationship for me." "Emily, when are you going to introduce us?" Susan asked. Michael and I are coming over for lunch this weekend. Mom, you don't bother cooking much, okay? You'll make a lot of dishes again. You'll get tired, so just make it hot and that's it. Michael and I will pick up some cake on the way. Emily, I'll certainly try, but you know me, I probably won't be able to do that, Susan replied, grinning. I like cooking. I like feeding you guys goodies, but I'll try. Emily had been working as a trauma doctor at the clinic for several years now. She graduated from the local medical university and immediately got a job at the clinic. Sometimes she took on inpatient duty, but only a couple of shifts a month. And meeting Michael happened right in the medical office. He was a pilot, an airplane commander. Hello, come in, Dr. Emily said in her duty phrase. It was a phrase she said 30 times every day. She didn't put much emotion into it. Absolutely not. And this time she said it without even lifting her head. Michael entered in his pilot's uniform, and Emily couldn't take her eyes off him for long. Tall, statuesque, handsome. Good afternoon, said the young man. I didn't expect to see such a fragile, beautiful person in the trauma doctor's chair. Emily broke into a smile. And you, I see, from ship to ball, the girl asked. Yes, you're right. Just off the flight, we flew with a flight from Vienna, and there was a rowdy passenger flying with us. The whole crew had to subdue him. That's what he got. Michael showed Emily his injured arm. Well, I hope you landed normally, Emily tried to joke. As you can see, both myself and all the passengers on Vienna to New York flight 345 arrived at our destination on time, the man reported back to her. Yes, you have a nervous job, Emily said and began to examine her arm. I'm going to send you for x-rays now. We need to find out if there's a fracture. Here you go, room 205 is on the second floor. You'll take the x-rays and then come back to me. Michael nodded. He walked around for about 15 minutes, then came in again, but knocked first. Emily had already looked at his picture in the program. I want to reassure you there is no fracture. I'm going to give you some ointment now. You will put ointment on your bruise twice a day. I promise your arm will be healed before the wedding, and she handed the pilot a prescription to the pharmacy. The young man took the prescription in his hands. Then he said, Emily, I don't do this every day, but I want to take you out to dinner tonight. Emily, who had filled out the chart in the computer, immediately looked up. She was very excited about the offer and of course accepted it, but she needed to pause for the sake of decorum, which she did. You know what, Michael, I don't get offers like this every day either, so I'll take it, Emily answered and smiled at the man. Where should I pick you up? He asked. Emily gave him the address of the apartment where she lived. Michael picked her up at 7 p.m., as they had agreed. Emily put on the most beautiful dress, came out to him in heels, thus conquering him with her beauty and charm. I'm even more convinced that I didn't ask you to dinner for nothing. You're adorable, Michael said as he opened the car door for Emily. Thank you so much for the compliment, she said shyly. They had a wonderful evening, a delicious dinner, pleasant company. It was as if they were made for each other, and that's what they both thought. Since then, they met often, not every day, because Michael had flights and Emily was on night duty. But they were always drawn to each other. Michael was telling his mother about his new girlfriend, Susan. She was an overbearing woman, constantly controlling her son, always wanting to know where he was and with whom. That's why she was wary of every girl he met. Mom, Emily's great. She will definitely like you, I assure you, reported to his mother, like a schoolboy, 30-year-old Michael. And where did you two meet? Inquired already Susan, organizing her son's interrogation. In the hospital, he answered. In the voice of the mother was heard a note of surprise. At the hospital? Yes, Mom, in the hospital. Remember, we had a fight in the cabin of the airplane? After that, I went to the hospital. Doesn't she work there as a doctor? Is your new girlfriend a trauma doctor? Susan asked. Yes. What hospital does she work at? At the First Regional Hospital. Mom, do you want to see her too? My son snickered. No, not yet. But Susan has already thought out that in the next long-distance flight of her son, she will go to this new girl for a checkup. Don't worry, Mom. I'll introduce you to her very soon. But Susan met Emily faster than Michael had introduced them. 2 days later, she was already standing on the threshold of the hospital campus, knew everything about Emily that could be learned from the internet: how long ago she graduated from university, what is her work experience, in which office receives and until what time. How much is her appointment without an appointment? It was impossible to make an appointment. All the nearest appointment was taken, so Susan went to pay for it. The reason, of course, she made up allegedly a sore knee, although a woman like Michael's mother will run around the city for another 10 years, and nothing will hurt her. Next, Emily uttered a phrase that had become a familiar one. Susan didn't have to be reminded a second time. She flew into the office like a bullet. Emily was surprised to see her in her office, but she didn't let on. Michael showed her a picture of his mother and told her that she was overprotective. "Hello," Emily said in a sweet voice. "What are you complaining about, Susan?" "My knee hurts." Periodically, that is, she corrected herself in time. "Does it hurt now?" Emily asked. "Not right now," Michael's mother replied. "At the moment, I can suggest that you go for an MRI of the lower extremities. We'll see what kind of treatment will work best for you and what's wrong with your knee, because joint problems are very common in women your age. Let's go." The woman didn't want to go anywhere. That's not why she came here. "No, not right now. Maybe later." "Emily, that's not why I came here at all." The girl, who had been writing something in the patient's medical records, stood up from the table and looked at her in surprise. "Why did you come, Susan?" Emily said. "I can guess, though. You're Michael's mom. He's told me a lot of nice things about you." That made Susan smile. Really, she answered calmly. "And I want to know from you about the seriousness of your intentions for my son. Michael, he is my only son, and I do not want him to be used and abandoned as second-rate material. You have no idea how much I care about him. Yes, he works hard, he has money." Susan, Emily interrupted her monologue. "I have very serious intentions for Michael. I love him, and I want to spend the rest of my life with him. I'm not the kind of girl who takes advantage of a man and leaves him. Don't worry. Now, if you have everything, you can go with your knee if you want to, and if it is really hurting, you can get it sorted out. Come in by appointment or call me, and I'll make an appointment for you myself. The patients sitting in the hallway are waiting for my appointment too." Susan got up from her chair. She wasn't very pleased that Emily had asked her to leave so unceremoniously, but she didn't let it bother her. "Very good, Emily. All right, I'll go. I hope Michael introduces us very soon. And I also hope Michael doesn't find out I'm here." And the woman left the office. At the end of the workday, Emily pondered the arrival of her potential future mother-in-law. Why had she come like that, unannounced? She considered her arrival to be insolent and rude, but she wouldn't tell Michael about it. After all, it was his mother, and she wished him nothing but the best. Emily also wondered what impression she had made on the woman, but of course she wouldn't know about that either, because Susan wouldn't ask about it directly. Emily had been very stressed about her mother's condition lately. Susan was thoughtful, but did not say anything, although they had a very trusting relationship. Although Emily lived separately, she came to her parents' house several times a week. Or they met with her mother on neutral territory in a cafe, at the theater, just in the park. Susan had recently begun to notice her husband's coldness toward her. She and Jason had been together for 30 years, and all that time it seemed to Susan that they treated each other very tenderly. And just the day before yesterday, she had gone to her favorite lingerie store that she and her husband often visited. She needed new pajamas, and in front of the store entrance, she saw her husband's car. "Strange, Jason's here without me," she thought to herself. "He must want to make me happy." While she thought about it, Jason came out of the store, got in his car, and drove away. Susan didn't even have time to react. With the hope that tonight she would get a present, the woman ran into the lingerie store satisfied. "Girls, please pick me up some pajamas," she said. "But not like my grandmother's, but with lace." "We understand," Susan, the sales clerks, who knew Susan and Jason's family, said friendly and began to pick out clothes for her. Jason ran out of the lingerie store in a hurry and left the bag with the lace bodysuit on the counter. The salesgirls didn't notice it right away, but only when Susan left. Coincidentally, Susan mixed up the packages and took the one that belonged to her husband Jason and left her own. It was only at home that she noticed this exchange of goods. That evening, excitedly after dinner, she unpacked her purchase. But what was her surprise when she saw in the bag not her pajamas at all, but a pink, lacy, translucent bodysuit. And the size was clearly not hers. She took the receipt out of the bag and decided to call the store, which was going to close in 15 minutes. She wanted to let her know that she had gotten the wrong package today. "Hello, girls, I came to see you today for pajamas," the woman said. She was recognized on the other end of the line. "I think I mixed up the bags. I didn't take my own, but in the bag with someone else's purchase," she said. "Do you have the receipt?" the girl on the other end of the line asked. "I'll look at it." "Yes, there is," said Susan, who pulled out a check for a considerable amount of money. She thought to herself that someone's man was very generous to his woman. "Please tell me the number of the discount card. We can use it to tell you who the purchase belongs to," the girl said. Just a second, Susan took the check, called the numbers on the receipt. This card and the purchase belonged to Jason Smith. Susan, hearing her husband's first and last name, fell into a stupor. But she needed to finish her dialogue with the store employee. "Okay, got it. I'll return the merchandise tomorrow and pick up mine. Thank you. Have a good evening," she said and hung up. After the conversation, she once again went to the gift bag that contained the item that wasn't hers, unfolded the bodysuit. It was about a size 44. Susan's size now was closer to a 58. This before, about 15 years ago, she might have fit into this bodysuit, but definitely not now. "Who's this for?" "Jason bought lingerie." "Did he have a mistress?" Questions immediately began to pop into her head. The thoughts made a cold sweat run down her spine. "No, my husband is not capable of that. We have lived in love and harmony for 30 years. Raised 2 children." Susan thought. She sat down in the chair and couldn't move. It was as if she had been electrocuted. It was the phone call that brought her out of her thoughts. "Susan, hi. Why aren't you answering your phone?" It was her best friend Ashley calling. "Hello? Susan, can you hear me?" "I can hear you," Susan mumbled quietly. "Susan, what's wrong? What's wrong with your voice?" "I don't know. I think something's wrong." "Can I come over now?" Ashley asked, who was in the neighborhood where Susan and Jason lived. "Yes, come over, I'm home," Susan added and hung up. She sat in the chair with the same unfortunate pink lace bodysuit in her hands until Ashley arrived. "Here, look," she handed Ashley the bodysuit. "What is it?" Ashley asked, surprised, twirling the underwear in her hands. "A bodysuit. My husband bought it for someone." Susan told her friend the story. "Well, Susan, what if it's a mistake?" "You've already got yourself in a twist," her friend consoled her. "Yeah, do you believe in this idea of a mistake? Jason was buying lacy lingerie, and it wasn't for me," Susan summarized. "I saw it with my own eyes." "Yes, you did. Don't you want to ask him yourself? You've always said that Jason and you have a trusting relationship," Ashley suggested. "I guess I'll have to do that. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to do it, because then my whole idea of a perfect family will be destroyed overnight. But it's better than not knowing," Susan said. "Let's have some tea, because I'm so thirsty." She bustled around the stove in the kitchen. Ashley stayed at her friend's house until evening, and then she left. Her presence calmed Susan a little, but the arrival of her husband from work brought her back down to earth. She decided not to tell him about the purchase she'd discovered. "Hey Jason, how was your day?" Susan asked her husband as usual. "The same, sweetheart." As usual, Jason replied tiredly. "Sorry, I won't eat dinner. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. I have to get up early tomorrow, and I have an important meeting in the morning." "I'll lie down in the living room so you won't be in the way." Susan tried to say the words in a firm voice so that she wouldn't show her husband her resentment. She wanted him to say, "Beloved, this is not disturbing me at all. I want to sleep tonight only with you." Therefore, what living room? But alas, the reality was quite different. Okay, Jason said, and went straight to the shower. Susan could hardly hold back her tears. In the morning, Jason left at about 6 a.m. Susan had just gotten up. Susan had just had time to get up when he ate breakfast and said, "I walked over to my wife, kissed her, and left for work." Susan was alone. "Emily, hi." Susan called her daughter for advice. "Can I see you tonight?" "I'm sorry, Mom, I can't." "I thought we said Friday," Emily replied. "Did something happen to you?" "Yes, I did." "All right, well, let's do it tonight at our cafe." All day Emily thought not about her patients, but about what could have happened to her mother. As a doctor, she immediately thought that she had some serious illness. Therefore, in the evening at the cafe, the girl began with the topic of illness. "Mom, don't worry. Nowadays, almost everything can be cured. We'll find you the best clinic, even abroad." "Emily, what are you talking about?" Susan couldn't hide her surprise, despite her daughter's pained look. "I'm not sick." "You mean you're healthy? I thought you'd found out you were ill, and that's why you've been so brooding lately." "No, Amy, that's not the case." Susan pulled herself together to tell her the problem. "It's that your father is cheating on me." Emily could not believe this information, as she had found out about it by accident. Susan recounted to her daughter the whole story with underwear, which completely accidentally surfaced in the woman's life. "Yes, I never thought that my father could do such a thing," Emily said thoughtfully. "Do you know who she is?" "No, and I want to find out soon. I just don't know how." "Amy, I lied to Michael by telling him that we have a perfect family. We're just a normal family with a typical cheating husband. That's how it turns out, as sad as it looks." While the women were talking, the waiter brought them coffee. "Thank you very much," Emily thanked him for the order. The waiter nodded in response. "Mom, we need to think of a way to get him out. Let's think about it together. I just don't know how to act in a situation like this, because it's the first time I've been in it." And Susan cried softly. "Mommy, please calm down. No one deserves your tears. I know it hurts, but we'll get through this together." Emily hugged her mom tightly. That night, Jason came in and said that he had to go to his mother's house in another town, that she was supposedly sick. "I'll take the train. It'll be faster and there won't be any traffic. I'm leaving tomorrow night." "Maybe I should come with you," Susan suggested timidly. "No, not yet," he replied quickly. "You know your mother doesn't like you very much, don't you? Let's not traumatize her just yet." "All right," Susan sighed. She had no relationship with her mother-in-law, no matter how they tried to make it work. Her mother-in-law was a bossy woman who wanted Jason to be with her. And when Susan came into his life, she didn't take kindly to her. Grandchildren Emily and Anthony loved immensely. But Susan never accepted. And Susan was very upset by this fact. But she gave up trying to please her mother-in-law. "What time is your train tomorrow?" Susan wondered whether Jason would lie or tell the truth. "At 5:10 p.m., her husband answered. "I'll walk you out." "You don't have to. Mind your own business. You have a lot of work to do around the house," he said. And it was true, there was always a lot of work in his house. It seemed to never end. Susan decided to follow her husband, who went to check on her sick mother. Arriving at the train station a little earlier, the woman saw her husband. True, he got on the train, not the one Susan expected, but the one that was going in the exact opposite direction. And Susan decided on her own head to quickly jump into the last carriage of the train to follow him. After going through all the cars and finding Jason in one of them, Susan sat behind him. It wasn't a long ride, only about an hour. Susan filled the stop. It was the Kalanina station. It was dark outside the window. There was some small, almost abandoned station. Susan was afraid to get off here following her husband. But on the platform she saw clearly that her husband went to the girl, kissed her, and they walked together by the hand into the darkness. Susan, seeing this picture, cried. The train moved on. Where was she going now? She didn't know. She just sat and rode in silence. After half an hour she came to her senses and realized she had to get off, so she got off at the nearest station. The station was quite large, but where to go, the woman did not know. so she called her daughter. "Emily, hi." Susan sobbed into the phone. "Mom, what's wrong? Where are you?" Emily tried to make sense of her words through the noise of the train and her mom's tears. "I don't know where I am," Susan continued to sob. "Mom, calm down. What is near you right now?" The daughter was trying to find out her mother's whereabouts. She didn't know she had traveled far away. "I went to the station to follow Jason. He said he was going to his mother's, but he got on a different train, so I got on the other train with him and followed him. He got off at some station called Kalinin, and there was a girl waiting for him." From these words, Susan again became very offended, and she sobbed again. "Mom, what is the name of your station?" Susan said the name of the station, which she read here on the sign. "Now find yourself some place to wait for us. As soon as I find out where you are, I'll come straight over." After talking to her mother, Emily rushed to open a map on her phone. Michael was beside her. He had the day off today. "Michael, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drag you into our family problems, but I can't do it any other way. Mom needs help." At the same time, Emily searched for the name of the station where Susan was now. She found it quickly and found that it was about 120 kilometers from the city. "Yeah, that's a long way for Mom to go. But we have no choice but to go pick her up. She's very depressed," Emily said. Michael went with her. He was driving, which was good because she was very nervous. And there was no telling if she would be able to drive for that long. Emily and Michael had a bit of a mix-up. It took about 2 to get to the station. With it already dark outside, Susan waited for them inside the station. During this time, she had already had time to digest her situation and calm down a bit, but still her condition was unstable. "Mom, are you okay?" The first thing Emily asked, meeting her mother's eyes. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm sorry for making you drive almost at night to pick me up." Susan felt uncomfortable, especially in front of Michael. "It's okay, Susan. Things happen in life." Michael was sympathetic. After picking up the woman, they all walked together to the parking lot where their car was parked. The drive back was faster, as it always was. Emily drove her mom home and they stayed the night at her house. After Susan fell asleep, Emily didn't dare call her dad. It was too late. But she couldn't bear to watch her parents' family crumble literally before her eyes. Jason picked up the phone relatively quickly. "Dad." "Hi," Emily said into the phone. "Oh, Emily, hi. Is something wrong that you're calling at this late hour?" "Yes, Dad, there is. Why don't you tell me what's going on between you and Mom?" "Daughter, let's you and I talk about everything when I come from Mom's." Father's voice was anxious. "Dad, can you not lie to me? I know you're not at Grandma's." The father on the other end of the line fell silent. "Daughter, let's talk about everything afterwards. I don't feel comfortable talking right now," and he hung up. Emily didn't realize that it was pointless to ask her father for details now. She just had to be patient and wait. But she didn't have much patience. In the morning, Emily was awakened by a phone call from an unknown number. "Hello," Emily said through her sleep. She always slept so sweetly at her parents' house. "Is this Emily?" The pleasant female voice on the other end of the line asked. "Yes, it's me." Emily jumped up on her bed. "I'm Amber, your father's mistress. We need to meet tomorrow night at Cafe Rebecca at 8 o'clock in the evening," the girl said very quickly. "Okay," was all Emily had time to reply. Amber quickly hung up the phone, apparently so her father wouldn't overhear the conversation. Emily didn't tell anyone about the call, not her mother, not Michael, not her father. She decided to go to the meeting first, and then act according to circumstances. Cafe Rebecca was located in the center of the city, and was considered one of the most prestigious establishments. Emily had been there only once before, as a student, when she had gone there with her friends. This time Emily felt at ease already. She had money for this cafe. Last time, when she was still a student, going to this place took half of her scholarship. Once inside, she searched her eyes for this Amber. Emily didn't know what she looked like, but her dad's mistress had found her and waved her over. Emily cautiously made her way in her direction. Emily, I'm going to have a short conversation with you. After all, you and I are not friends. I urge you to keep quiet about our conversation, otherwise it will be worse for you. Amber started the conversation. Emily carefully sat down in the soft chair. A waiter immediately came over to her. "I'll have a cedar latte, please," she said. One thing Emily remembered from her college days was that Rebecca's made very good coffee. The waiter nodded and walked toward the kitchen. "I have a favor to ask of you," Amber continued. "Get off my Michael, and I'll get off your father's back." Emily didn't understand anything. "What are you talking about? And what right do you have to tell me to leave Michael?" The girl was indignant. "I have every right," Amber shouted. "You're the reason Michael left me. He met you and left me." "What the hell are you talking about, Amber?" Emily still couldn't understand what kind of nonsense this girl sitting across from her was talking about. "Before Michael met you, he and I dated. He was in love with me, and then he met you, and he turned his attention to you and forgot all about me. But I didn't let that go. I found out about your family and I got your father to fall in love with me. I had no trouble seducing him. Apparently he was so caught up in his old family relationships that he jumped on me like a hungry dog on a bone. What did your mommy do to him?" Amber laughed. "Don't you dare say that about my mommy," Emily exclaimed. She hated to hear such words about her parents. "What's your dad like in bed?" Amber continued to play. "If you want your father back in the family, leave Michael alone," Amber said and got up from the table. "Otherwise I'll make him marry me, which will completely break your mother. And I'm not kidding. I'm no joke." After saying that, Amber walked out of the cafe. Emily was shocked. The waiter had long ago brought her the cedar latte she had ordered, but she couldn't bring herself to take even one sip of coffee. Finally, she took that sip. The coffee warmed her up so much. And she began to think about what she should do next, whether she should tell Michael or her father or her mother, or leave Michael for the sake of bringing her father back into the family. Would her parents be able to maintain a good relationship after all this? Emily was at a crossroads. She then decided to just talk to her father about what was going on between him and her mother. The next morning, after canceling an appointment at work, Emily arrived at her father's workplace. "Emily, what are you doing here so early in the morning? Why aren't you at work?" her father asked indignantly. He was uncomfortable that the whole mistress thing might come out. "Dad, I came here so you could tell me everything. I don't recognize Mom. She's completely exhausted. Tell me, who is this woman?" Emily went straight to talking about the mistress. "She's a flight attendant," Jason replied nervously. "But it's clear to me now," Emily said out loud, thinking she was speaking to herself. "What has become clear to you, Emily?" "I don't get it," her father was perplexed. Nothing. "Dad, how serious is your relationship with this Amber?" "Oh, you already know her name." "Good for you," Jason said ironically. "Stop being ironic, Dad. Our family is crumbling before our eyes. How serious is your relationship with this woman?" "Honestly, daughter, I had a crush on her, but I didn't think it would go this far. Admittedly, the initiative came from her. But of course she wouldn't have missed out on a man like you, wealthy, successful, athletic, and handsome." "Dad, don't start talking about Mom. Have you seen the state she's in? Or are you only interested in your job and this Amber?" Emily was ready to explode, but held back as best she could. "I'm not ready to leave the family yet," her father admitted. "You know I have a lot in common with Susan. I can't leave it all behind like that. But I can't leave Amber either." This is when Emily couldn't take it anymore. "Daddy, don't you realize she's just using you?" the girl screamed. "Emily, calm down." Her father tried to calm her down, but to no avail. Emily burst into hysterics and ran out of the study, slamming the door loudly. She didn't get to have a frank conversation with her father. Jason was alone. He paced back and forth in his large office with his hands behind his back. He realized that this affair had gone too far, and it wouldn't be easy for him to get out of it. But what should he do? Leave Susan and go to Amber, the woman who'd made him young again? Or live out his life with his wife? He didn't know the answers to those questions, but he realized that his relationship with his daughter Emily had soured. Emily ran out of her father's office, ran to her car in the parking lot, and tried to calm down in the car. She didn't manage to calm down right away. When she was able to drive, the girl decided to go to her mother's house and talk to her. Today was Susan's day off. She was a little surprised at her daughter's sudden appearance. "Emily, why aren't you at work?" asked a confused Susan, who hadn't slept well the previous night. "And what's wrong with your eyes? Have you been crying?" Emily went straight to the kitchen. Susan, without further ado, put the kettle on. "Mom, I saw her," Emily pronounced. "Her who?" "Well, Dad's mistress. Her name is Amber, and she works as a stewardess." Susan was wary of the word mistress, but where had Emily been able to see her? "She called me on her own." Emily began to tell her story, and got upset again, reliving it all over again. "Mom, the thing is, this Amber stole Dad on purpose for Michael. Daughter, are you okay?" "What are you talking about?" Susan didn't realize if her daughter was delusional or telling the truth. "Mom, I'm perfectly fine," she told me herself. "If I want my father back in the family, I have to leave Michael. Allegedly, Michael dumped her and left her for me." "I don't get it." Susan shook her head, trying to put what she had heard in order. "Amber doesn't like Jason at all. That's what I'm telling you right now. She'd gotten involved with him to get back at me. And Jason fell for it. But she's beautiful, young, well-groomed, and she's got a lot of nerve. She told me that I had to leave Michael, and then Jason would come back to you." Susan was silent. She finally got the full meaning of what she had said. "I have a counter question. Do you think I'd want your father after all this? And how disgusting. Jason falling for some young girl, betraying me, betraying the kids. Emily, do you have to move on with Michael? You have to make your own destiny. And if you love Michael, then by no means sell your love. Don't leave him for this Amber. If Michael is with you now, then he loves you." Emily, hearing these words from Susan's mom, walked over to her and hugged her tightly. "Mommy, but I feel so sorry for you. Can you survive such a betrayal?" "I can. For your sake, Anthony, I can do anything and survive it," Susan replied. The women were unable to continue the conversation further, as Emily's younger brother Anthony came in from practice. He was still a high school student, finishing 11th grade this year and preparing to go to university. "Hi, little brother," Emily said the phrase in a deliberately cheerful voice. "Anthony doesn't need to know anything." "Hey sis, why aren't you at work?" "I'm working the second shift today. I just stopped by to see you and Mom." Emily and her mom decided to talk next time. Emily went to work. Michael. She decided not to say anything yet, but she wasn't planning on leaving him either. Amber called Emily 2 days later, though. "So, Emily, are you going to leave Michael alone?" "Mistress, she's never been treated with ceremony. Remember, I will never leave Michael alone. And you stay away from my father after all." "I won't. I'm going to make Jason leave your mother, and I'm going to leave her with nothing." "You little bitch," Emily almost shouted into the phone. "But you'll never get away with it, no matter how hard you try," and the girl herself hung up the receiver. Her hands were shaking from the vile words she had just heard. 2 days later, Jason didn't come home for the first time. Emily had been told about it by his mother. A week later, he told Susan he was leaving her for someone else. He couldn't hide it anymore. "Susan, thank you for all the years you and I have been together. Thank you for the kids, for Emily and Anthony. They're wonderful. But I'm sorry I met someone else," Jason said. It was hard for him to say those words. He'd been thinking about them for a long time. But Amber had forced him to leave his family. She'd blackmailed him into losing her, and he'd grown attached to her and couldn't live a day without her. After saying that, Jason went up to his bedroom to pack his suitcase. He did so quickly, and on his way out he added, "I'll file for divorce myself." When he left, Susan let the tears fall. In her opinion, it was the end of her family, which she had so lovingly created all this time. But somehow life had to go on. Susan stood by Emily. Amber, learning that Emily wasn't going to leave Michael, freaked out and decided to act out to spite her. Daily, she told her lover Jason to leave the family. "Jason, when you leave that Susan of yours and come to me so we can have a full family. I'm going to have a baby for you," Amber told Jason. His mistress took him in her affection, and Jason gave in, plucked up his courage, and told Susan the truth. And Amber rejoiced. After Jason came to her for good, she'd pictured Emily. But the reaction of her powerlessness, her anger at her father for abandoning her mother. But it was Emily's own fault. Amber had warned her. Emily chose not to retaliate against Amber. Spent all her free time at her mom's, which is exactly what her loved ones wanted. Amber, not seeing the wounded response at all, decided to move on. She wanted Michael too, and she didn't need Jason. Michael was her target. So she needed to set up a meeting with Michael. Amber and Michael worked for the same airline. Michael was a co-pilot at first and flew in the allotted hours and proved himself to his superiors in an extremely positive way. He became an aircraft commander. Amber worked for the airline as a flight attendant. She liked Michael immediately. In general, Amber had a love for pilots since childhood. She could not explain it in any way. But she read novels in her youth. For some reason, she imagined her soulmate was a pilot and no one else. When she saw Michael, she realized she was lost. She flirted with him for a long time, trying to draw attention to herself. Michael, who had no girlfriend at the time, fell for her advances and seductions. But he did not feel anything serious about her, and told her repeatedly. But Amber, at that moment, everything was fine. After all, Michael was with her, and it was the most important thing for her. And then Michael met Emily and disappeared. He left Amber, and he was honest with her about everything. She was furious, and she couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept that Michael had traded her for someone else. She didn't immediately follow Michael's new girlfriend. In principle, it wasn't hard to do. Emily had come to the airport a few times to pick Michael up after work. Then she found out all about Emily, her family, tracked down her father, and arranged a chance meeting in the parking lot. Amber went back to her big job to get Michael back, but he never came back to her. And one day, while leaving the airport with Michael, Amber struck up a conversation with him. "Michael, hey." Amber caught up with him. "How are you doing?" "Hey, yeah, I'm good." "Michael, I wanted to tell you that I'm not mad at you anymore," Amber said with a sly tone. "I finally met my love, too." "Yeah, I'm really happy for you. I really am." "I hope he's a good man?" Michael asked. "Yes, he is. And you know him?" "I know him. You intrigue me. Who is he? Tell me." "That's a mystery. Michael, why don't we go to the coffee shop tonight? Or do you want to come over for a cup of tea, just for old time's sake?" Amber needed to lure him into her web. She had a plan in her head. Michael gave it some thought and agreed. "Shall we? I'm not in any hurry right now. Emily's on shift till tonight." "Oh, great, to our favorite coffee shop like we used to." Aha. And Michael and Amber wrapped up at a diner near the airport. "Have you had breakfast, Michael?" No, I haven't. So I'm going to get some cereal with peanuts and tea." "That's right." "I do," Amber admitted to him, and ordered all the things she had listed. He ordered himself scrambled eggs and sausage and an espresso. Amber needed to lure Michael to her house at all costs. To do so, she opted for a sleeping pill in her purse, which she needed to discreetly slip into his drink. She had no trouble doing so. When Michael went to the bathroom, she calmly took and added the medicine to his coffee. Only she made a small dosage, so that he did not pass out right here in the cafe. Unsuspecting, Michael calmly ate his scrambled eggs, began to drink. After taking a couple of sips, he felt weak and drowsy. "I guess I'm so tired from the flight today that I'm really sleepy," Michael said, closing his eyes as he walked. Amber realized that now was the time to take action. "Michael, why don't we go to my place? You can take a nap at my place, because it's a long drive home." He couldn't resist, so he agreed. Happy, Amber took him under her arm and quickly led him to her car. As they drove, Michael fell asleep. She had to work hard to wake him up when they arrived and could barely get him up to her. When she got Michael into her apartment, Amber took him into the bedroom, took off his shirt, and covered him with a blanket. Then she undressed herself and lay down next to him. Amber did all of this so that she could take pictures of them lying in bed together and doing well. Those pictures were safely taken. There was no Photoshop needed. Everything looked so realistic that even a simpleton would believe it. After that, Amber got out of bed, changed into her house clothes, and lay down on the couch. Jason was on a business trip. There was no need to fear that he would suddenly come home. Michael woke up 4 hours later. He couldn't realize anything at first. Where am I? He whirled his head around, trying to figure it out. "Honey, I've got you," Amber said affectionately as she ran in at the sound of his voice. "You and I had such a good time." Michael couldn't understand a thing. "What time?" My head hurt like I'd been drinking nonstop for a week. I thought we were at a coffee shop. How did I get here? "You invited me to your place. So I went. I love you." Amber hugged him. Michael pulled her arms off his shoulders. "Don't, Amber. I don't believe there could be anything between us." "You don't believe it, but look." The girl showed him the pictures she had taken. "You set this whole thing up on purpose. You lured me to the cafe to slip me something." Michael couldn't believe the veracity of the pictures Amber was showing him. "Michael, it was your initiative, and I just went along with it," Amber replied. "Don't you ever send those pictures." "Ashley, do you understand me?" "Do you? Are you threatening me?" "No, not yet. I'm just warning you." Michael barely got out of bed and walked out of the apartment. Amber was rubbing her hands together because she'd done it. Michael went first to the airport to pick up his car because he'd left work in a hired car. Then he was in a hurry to get back before Ashley got home from work. He broke all the rules, but he made it to the apartment where they'd been living together for months. He got there a half hour before she got back, changed quickly, and showered. All those half hours he wondered if he had something with Amber or if she'd cheated on him. "Hi," Ashley greeted cheerfully when he got home from work. "Hi, Ashley." Michael came out to greet her, gave her a kiss and a hug. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too. How's your mom?" Michael suddenly asked her. "Not good," Ashley said sadly. "She can't get over it, and I don't know what to do." "Ash, it's going to take time. Unfortunately, nothing else will help. I'm sure Susan will come through this ordeal with flying colors. We just have to wait a little longer." "I certainly hope so," Ashley replied. "She's spending a lot of time with Anthony. He's finishing 11th grade and getting ready for college. Her father hasn't called or written since he met Amber, and it's like he's lost his mind. As they say, a gray hair in his beard, a black eye in his rib." "What are your plans for tonight, my love?" Ashley asked playfully. "I just want to lie in front of the TV with my favorite girl," Michael replied. "I don't mind." Michael and Ashley spent the day together as they had planned. One day, Ashley went to her father's office to pick up his papers. Her mother had asked her to do so. Susan didn't want to see her husband again, so she asked her to go to Ashley's father's office. Ashley stopped by after work, and he wasn't there alone. Emily was sitting in her father's office. This meeting hadn't gone too badly, even though it had been unpleasant. "What can you do?" "Dad, Mom asked me to pick up my papers," Emily started the conversation. "Give them to me and I'll go. They're in the locker room now, in my briefcase." Jason went to the locker room, and Emily was alone with Amber in the office. She restrained herself from saying anything hurtful to Amber, but she wasn't holding back. "How did you like Michael in bed?" Amber asked ironically. "What's it to you?" Emily snapped at him. "Or does my father not suit you at all?" "No, I'm fine with him, but I like Michael better." "Stop it, Amber." Emily yelled at her. "By the way, Michael and I had a lot of fun recently," she said, as if she didn't mean it. "A couple days ago, Michael came over for a couple hours." "Didn't he tell you that?" "Oh, that's too bad. I thought you two had a very trusting relationship." "I don't believe you," Emily replied sharply. "And I have proof." Amber pulled out her phone to show Emily the pictures from earlier. "Well, I think we look great in bed together. Don't you think?" Emily flipped through the pictures, unable to take her eyes off them. While she was looking at them, her father came back with the papers. "Here you go," he said. Emily took the documents with trembling hands and left the office without saying anything. "What's wrong with her?" Dad asked Amber. "I don't know," she said. "I don't really care about your daughter, to be honest." Emily walked on, tears dripping from her eyes. She couldn't believe that her beloved Michael, her sweetheart, was cheating on her. The girl got into her car, let the tears flow, and then drove home. She needed to find out all the things that Michael was hiding from her. When she arrived, Michael was home. "Hi, sweetheart," he said. But Emily didn't say anything, just looked up at him with her big, blue, crying eyes. "Is something wrong?" "Something with Mom?" Michael asked her. "No, Mom's fine. But our relationship is over," Emily replied. "What are you talking about?" "Anne, I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm saying you can go back to your Amber. You and I are no longer on the same path. How could you go out with me and get in bed with her?" After saying that, Michael realized what he was talking about. Amber showed her the pictures she'd taken when he'd suddenly fallen asleep. "I'll explain everything to you right now," he tried to justify himself. "I don't want to hear any of your explanations. I've got it all figured out," Emily said harshly, though it hurt her to say such words to the man she loved. "Now please take your things and go live at your place." Michael realized that Emily was very upset with him. He himself would have been offended too, so without further ado he gathered the necessary things and left the apartment. Emily was left alone. She cried all evening, sitting on the couch and remembering their relationship with Michael, how it had started, how much romance there had been in the beginning, how she had fallen in love with him as a freshman girl, how she had waited for him from flights. She remembered and cried even harder from the hopelessness that nothing could be taken back. In the evening, her mom came to visit her. Susan's visit was planned. She wanted to pick up the documents Emily had traveled to her father's office to get. Susan saw Emily crying. "What's wrong, daughter?" she asked. Now Susan had to comfort her daughter. "Mom, it's Amber. Imagine today when I went to my father's house, she showed me pictures of her and Michael in bed. It was a few days ago," Emily said, sobbing. She felt sorry for herself. "Are you sure it's not a montage?" Susan asked. "Just knowing Michael and his attitude toward you, I can't believe it. What did Michael say to that?" "And I did not listen to him," said the daughter. "The picture was enough for me. But you can't do that. You always have to hear two points of view. This Amber's interest is clear to me. She wants Michael back any way she can. She even went through Jason, but she realized she didn't get her ex back. She's angry, and she's being mean." "Mom, not making excuses for him," her daughter continued. "I'm not making excuses. That Amber is an asshole, and she needs to be dealt with in her own way," Susan said firmly. She was belligerent. "I realize now that Jason is just a fling for her. And I've been asking myself for days, why didn't I fight for my husband? And Emily, maybe you should have given that girl a big send-off." "Mom, is that you?" Emily didn't recognize her usually quiet and calm mother. "How do you want to fight for Dad?" "I don't know yet. It's Anthony's birthday, so we need to get the whole family around the family table soon. Can you help me? And we'll invite my dad too, of course. Without Amber, of course. And we'll reminisce about all the good times we used to have together." "Mom, I don't know what it'll look like, but I'll help," Emily nodded. Her resentment toward Michael had been put on the back burner for now. Emily spent all her free time preparing for her brother's birthday. Anthony was turning 18. He decided to celebrate his holiday twice, with friends in a cafe and with relatives at home. A couple days before the party, Anthony called his father. "Dad, hi. I hope you didn't forget. It's my birthday." "No, of course not, son. How could I forget?" Jason replied sincerely. He had a wonderful relationship with his son. He didn't want to lose that relationship to a new love. "Dad, we're going out with the family. I'll see you at home on June 25th. Will you come?" Jason paused for a moment, which made Anthony want to get upset, and then he said, I will, Anthony, thank you. I just hope you'll come without her. You know, Mom, Emily, the in-laws, no one will be happy to see her. I'm not such a fool, his son realized. And Jason did keep his word and came to the party on time and without his Amber. Susan met her husband as if there had never been any marital discord in their relationship. She was affectionate, friendly with him. It was a family celebration that everyone enjoyed, and the birthday boy himself was happy, and a full family, and gifts that made him relatives. After the feast was nearing completion, Anthony with a glass suddenly rose from the table. My relatives, I want to say a big thank you to all of you. Thank you for what I have. To you, Dad, I say a special thank you for coming, and we are together with you now as before. Anthony's words touched both his father, mother, and Emily deeply. Even tears rolled out of their eyes and fell into the glasses with sparkling wine. Emily, where is Michael? The father asked his daughter. He didn't know they were in a fight and Michael was on a flight. She had lied to him. She didn't feel like telling her father the whole story right now at the party. The family and friends slowly began to disperse. But Jason, after drinking a little wine with Susan's brother, didn't want to leave. Dad, why don't you stay home tonight? Suggested Emily, who wanted to annoy Amber. Dad didn't refuse the offer. He was glad he did, because he would have been too embarrassed to ask to stay over. He and Vitaly sat outside that night. Jason went to his and Susan's bedroom, as was his habit, and only when he lay down did he realize that he had done something wrong. But Susan didn't kick him out, but decided to use her mistress's methods. As soon as Jason fell asleep, Susan took a picture of them together. All night Jason's phone was ringing off the hook with missed calls, but Susan turned down the sound on her phone and fell asleep peacefully. She was furious that Jason wasn't answering her. She knew exactly where her lover had gone and was very worried about missing Michael. She couldn't let Jason go now, or she'd be left with nothing. And she didn't want that. She called all night, then all morning. Jason woke up around 0800 and grabbed his phone and saw about 30 missed calls from Amber. He immediately called her back. So where were you all night? My son's birthday party ran late, Jason said. Amber answered with a look of displeasure. I fell asleep on the couch in the living room, Jason lied. I'll come over and explain everything. Jason hadn't even had breakfast, leaving his former home. Susan had sent the pictures from the night before to Amber through Emily right after her husband left. Amber got those pictures and was just furious. As soon as Jason walked in, she gave him a huge scandal. He didn't confront her. He had a headache. He drank a cup of coffee with a hangover and drove to work. He didn't have the energy for a fight. He wasn't sure if he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Amber. Meanwhile, Emily's mom insisted that Emily have a serious talk with Michael. You're the master of your own destiny, Susan told Emily. And if you want to live the rest of your life with him, talk to him. Tell him the truth about Amber. Tell him that she is now your father. Michael, on the other hand, is still in the dark about who Jason and the mistress are. We need to untangle this snake pit. And who's going to do it if not you and me? Over breakfast, they began to spend many a night at my parents' house. Michael calls you, Susan said. Yes, every day. But I don't answer the phone. I think he betrayed me. What if Amber set this whole thing up on purpose to break you two up? You have to meet him. Emily thought about her mom's suggestion for a long time. On the one hand, she really wanted to meet Michael. She missed him so much. But on the other hand, she immediately remembered those nasty pictures, and she didn't want anything else. But the meeting presented itself. Michael was waiting for Emily at her work. We need to talk to you right away, he said. This can't go on much longer. I have to explain everything to you. Without speaking, he took Emily's hand and led her to his car. She didn't resist. In her subconscious, she was looking forward to this meeting. I owe you an explanation about these pictures, Michael began. Yes, they were taken at her house. But I honestly don't remember when. One thing I do remember is that Amber and I were leaving work after a hard shift. She invited me to a coffee shop near work. Since you were working through the evening, I agreed to sit for an hour and have breakfast. And after I drank the tea, it was all a blur. I don't remember how I got into her car. I don't remember how I ended up in bed at her place. You may not believe me, but I remember everything very, very vaguely. It was like something had been put in my drink. I believe you, Emily replied. I believe that she's capable of it, because she's been trying to break us up for so long. And your biggest mistake right now is that you didn't tell her that Amber is your ex-girlfriend, and she wants you back so badly. Michael, hearing those words, turned sharply toward Emily. How do you know that? Amber told me. You know that Amber and Daddy's mistress are the same person. He couldn't hide his surprise. But how? So your dad is dating my ex-girlfriend? Yeah, that's right. But that's not all, Michael. Your ex-girlfriend Amber specifically started dating my dad Jason to get back at me. I went out with her, and she told me in no uncertain terms to dump you so she'd leave my dad alone. But I didn't, as you can see, because I love you. And that really pissed her off. So she decided to set me up with pictures of you. But that doesn't mean that nothing happened between you two. I mean, it doesn't, Emily said. Michael, I swear to you that nothing happened between me and Amber. At least not while I was in my memory. Yes, I do, Emily said affectionately. But why didn't you tell me earlier that you knew all about Amber? I didn't want to involve you in the family squabbles, she said. Does your father know about Amber? Did she go out with him on purpose? No, no one's told him that yet. I want to tell him, but I just need him to hear it from Amber. He might not believe me. Then we'll build on that, Michael suggested. Let's get Amber out in the open. How do we do that? Emily asked again. You need to meet with her again, but record the entire conversation. I'll call her now and make an appointment, Michael suggested. Emily nodded. There was one number in her phone book. She found it, called it. It rang. Hello, Amber answered. Amber, this is Emily, Michael's current girlfriend. Remember when we met you at the coffee shop? Yeah, of course I remember. I'm going to be your stepmom soon. Amber said into the phone. Amber, if your offer to dump Michael still stands, I'm in. But we need to meet again and talk things through. I need assurances, Emily said into the phone. I'll never give up on Michael, so it's on. Do you want to meet? Well, let's do it tonight at 8 p.m. at the same place, Amber suggested. Okay, Emily replied. Well, that's half done, Michael said as Emily hung up the phone after talking to Amber. Yeah, but I'm so scared to do all this, like I'm going to betray you tonight, she added. Don't be afraid of anything, Emily, I'll always be there for you. Trust me, Michael said and leaned in to kiss her. Emily did not resist for the first time in a long time. After that conversation, they drove to the apartment where they had lived together before their fight. Emily began to get ready to talk, as it was already 4 o'clock. I could take you to a coffee shop, Michael offered, but she declined. Emily was afraid that Amber would notice him and not believe that the whole situation was real. Finally, evening came, and Emily drove to Boston in her car. It wasn't a long drive, so she got there in 15 minutes. Amber was already sitting at a table in the cafe in all her war paint. You've had enough of Michael, haven't you? Amber asked. No, I love Michael, but I'm sorry about Mom. She's very depressed. She doesn't go out, she doesn't eat, she lied. I really hope that Daddy will come back to the family and everything will get better. Mom will revive at least a little. But I need to know that if I leave Michael, you'll leave Dad alone. Yeah, I promise you that. You leave my Michael and I'll leave your father. I don't love him. I don't love him. I only needed him to accomplish my goal, Amber said loudly. Emily had time to turn on the recorder on her phone and write it all down. Okay, Emily replied. I believe you, Michael is yours. With those words, Emily got up from the table without ordering anything. Everything she wanted to get, she had already gotten. She drove home and told Michael everything. Amber believed it. You have to play your part now, Emily said. She and Michael agreed that he was in the play and would play the role of the jilted and hurt boyfriend. They wanted to get Amber to dump her wounded father. Amber found out about Emily dumping Michael 2 days later. She caught up with him when they got off work together again. Michael, is it true? Did you and Emily break up? Yes, I did, he answered her. So now I have a chance again? Amber asked ambiguously. But everyone always has a chance, he answered ambiguously and walked on. Amber took his answer as a call to action and acted on it. She needed to tell Jason that they were breaking up. But first she needed to make sure Michael was in her good graces. Amber didn't want to be alone. One night, Amber called Michael, and he was at Emily's at the time, but Michael answered the phone. "Hey, why don't you and I get together? I've missed you." He paused for a moment, then agreed. "All right, let's go to a coffee shop near your house." Emily didn't like hearing that, but Michael reassured her. "Emily, honey, but just be patient. As soon as we get Amber out in the open, we'll get you married. We have to get your father out of that stewardess clutches." Michael began packing for his meeting with Amber. Emily let him go with a heavy heart. What kind of girl would send her favorite guy to meet her ex-girlfriend? And a very attractive one at that. Michael arrived at the cafe. Amber arrived about 5 minutes after him, walked up to him and gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek. "Michael, I missed you so much." The test was a given, Amber said. "And I missed you a little too," Michael added a little later. "I was told you grieved after me. And not for long. Did you find a new boyfriend quickly?" She faltered, but she had to answer something. "Yeah, it was just a fling. I thought I told you about him. An older man just bored with his boring family life, got attracted to me. I'm bored with him. We have very different interests." "Interested in you, or did you seduce him?" Michael clarified. "Michael, but let's not get into that. I'm way past that stage of my life. I'm going to tell him today that it's over between us, even though he's so attracted to me. But I want you and only you, and I'll talk about it 1,000 times. But I can't promise you anything serious. I've just been dumped, and I'm disappointed in every woman in the world right now. Trust me, I can prove to you that not all women are assholes. There are some decent ones. We'll see about that. First, you need to break up with your current boyfriend." "I'll do it tonight," Amber replied. Michael and Amber sat in the cafe for about an hour and a half talking about nothing. Michael was once again convinced that Amber wasn't right for him, she was too empty for him. Amber told Jason some unpleasant news that evening. "Jason, we have to break up," she began the conversation. The man had had a busy day today. He hadn't eaten most of the day. He hadn't waited for dinner from Amber either. "Amber, what the hell are you talking about?" he said. "I'm tired as a dog today. I'm hungry, but there's nothing at home. You were home all day yesterday. Why didn't you at least boil some borscht? And now you're telling me you're breaking up with me." "Jason, I'm not kidding. I want to break up with you." "I mean it," Amber added. "What's the reason?" the man asked sternly. "I don't love you. I don't feel like you're my man. So I'm asking you to get out of my apartment today and tomorrow." Jason, these words really hurt him. Had he, at almost 50, lived to be dumped by a young girl? "Didn't I give you enough money?" he asked. "It's fine," Amber replied. "But you're not my man. I'm sorry, I don't want to get into this anymore. I'm tired." Amber left the bedroom where the conversation was taking place. Jason immediately packed his suitcase and left the apartment. He had nowhere to go back to. He wasn't going straight to Susan's house. So he drove back to the hotel, frustrated and angry not so much at Amber as at himself for being such a fool. He'd thought she was the girl he was going to spend the rest of his life with. How had he been wrong? Naive. As soon as Jason left, Amber silently called Michael. "Michael, I want you to know that I broke up with my Jason. He just moved out of my apartment. You can come over." Amber was pleased. She couldn't believe that her plan had finally worked and that she and Michael would be reunited very soon. But how wrong she was. Michael told Amber that he couldn't come to her place today because his mom was sick and he needed to be there for her. Amber believed him, saying she was expecting him any time. And Michael, of course, was at Emily's the whole time. He's the one who told her what Amber said about breaking up with her dad. "I wonder where he went now. Probably to a hotel. Because he has nowhere else to go," Emily said. "Emily, listen. What if I called my dad and asked him to come over to my mom's house and tell him that we wanted to have dinner at my mom's house?" What do you think? Michael suggested. That's not a bad idea. Call him. Michael agreed, and Emily immediately dialed her father. Dad, hey, what are you doing right now? Do you have time right now? Why don't you come over to Mom's? We're planning on going over there too. We're going to sit around and drink tea from the samovar. Emily, would it be okay for me to go to her house uninvited? I was mean to her, leaving her, Jason said. Dad, but Anthony and I are calling you, and I think she'll understand that we wanted to talk to Dad. All right, I'll be there in an hour, Jason replied. He had nothing to do at the hotel, so he agreed to spend time with the kids. Emily had time to tell her mother, and she and Michael went to Susan's house. Jason didn't lie, he came. It was awkward for him, but he managed with his agility, and they all sat down to drink tea from the samovar and play bingo. And after a while, Emily called Daddy to talk to her. Dad, I've got a rather complicated conversation to have with you about your Amber. I broke up with her today. She kicked me out of her apartment, said she didn't love me, Jason replied. I know how. I didn't turn on the recording on my phone. Yeah, I promise you. You leave my Michael, and I'm leaving your father. I don't love him. I only needed him to accomplish my goal, Amber said on the recording. Dad, Amber didn't love you at all. She only seduced you to get Michael away from me. She'd dated him before, but Michael dumped her when he met me. And I just found out all of this recently. You fell for her and hurt your mom, Emily said. Jason didn't say anything, but he didn't have much to say. In his defense, Michael had faked our breakup and told her that he was ready to go out with her again. She dumped you that same day, Dad. She's nothing, Emily finished and left the room. Jason remained standing alone in the room in silence. The next day evening, Emily walked Michael to work outside the airport. They met up with Amber. Emily purposely hugged Michael, kissing him. He reciprocated by kissing her too. Amber walked by them just then, and Emily had time to say, "You're too excited, sweetheart. You'll never see my Michael. He's mine and mine alone. You're a liar, Michael." Only now she realized that she had been tricked. You're not all about screwing around with men. You stole my father away from my family, so you're left with nothing, Emily added. She was glad that Amber was finally getting what she deserved. And she deserved to be left alone. Michael and Emily got married a few months later and went on their honeymoon in Los Angeles. Emily had long dreamed of visiting that city. After the honeymoon, they sold their 2 apartments and bought a large 2-story house. And a year later, they had a son who was named James. Emily was on maternity leave, and Michael continued to work as an airplane captain. Susan, mother-in-law, not immediately, but accepted her daughter-in-law into her family because she had no choice. Emily healed Susan's knee, for which she was also very grateful. It took Susan a while, but she forgave Jason, who had apologized to her 1,000 times and asked for permission to return to their family nest. Susan accepted him back and tried not to remember everything that had happened between him and his mistress, Amber. In fact, Amber's name was avoided in this family. Too much emotion had been stirred up by it so far. Anthony, Emily's younger brother, graduated from high school and entered the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Amber quit her job at the airline where she and Michael worked together and left town for good. Their mutual acquaintances talked about Amber meeting her love and getting married too. But most importantly, she no longer bothered Emily, Michael, or Jason and Susan with her presence. Arriving at his ex-wife's house a year after the divorce, her husband froze upon learning of her fate. Amanda ran to the kitchen sink and splashed the coffee she had just drunk from a cup. "Catherine is messing with me again," the woman thought with anger and despair. "Stop hitting her with a belt," Amanda said out loud. She had woken up this morning in a good mood for once. It was Saturday, the whole weekend was ahead of her. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering lazily where the sun bunny had come from. She didn't immediately realize that it was a mirror lying on her bedside table, on which the rays were falling. How quiet is the house? Amanda wondered. It was 10 o'clock. John and Catherine should have been up by now. She planned to go to the mall and buy herself the pants she'd been eyeing on the store's website for a while and pick up some clothes for her stepdaughter. Afterward, she and her husband could spend the day together. Amanda turned on her side and saw a note from her husband gone on business. Urgently summoned. But John won't know when he'll be back, she thought. Why does he have to be the one to be pulled on weekends? If the boss himself had traveled like this, he would not have sent others. Her husband was the deputy head of a large construction firm. He often personally traveled to the sites, including on weekends. This dampened Amanda's mood a little, but she tried not to give in to sadness. The woman threw a robe over her nightgown and went down to the first floor. In the kitchen, she boiled water in an electric kettle, poured ground coffee into a cup, and poured boiling water over it. John wouldn't fail to remind me that there's a coffee machine in the house. Amanda smiled. But it was nice to be able to make coffee the old-fashioned way, like when I was a student. She covered the cup with a saucer and went to the bathroom to wash up. Amanda decided to take a shower and stood under the cool jets for about 10 minutes. Then she returned to the kitchen, looked out the window and smiled at the sunny summer day that promised only good things. But it was a sip of coffee that ruined everything. Apparently, while I was in the bathroom, Catherine came into the kitchen and put something in the drink. Amanda pondered. What kind of nasty stuff did she find? Was it black pepper or Brooklyn? She had no desire to taste the liquid a second time. She emptied the cup into the sink and sighed. Her mood was hopelessly ruined. For the 6 years that Amanda had lived with John, she had tried to find common ground with Catherine, his daughter from her first marriage, but she had failed. And it all started with their very first meeting, when a man brought his then not yet wife, but the woman he loved to introduce his 9-year-old daughter. I had one mom, and I do not need a new one, said the girl, turned around and went into the room. Will she get used to it? John then divorced his hands. It's been 3 years since Mary died. She misses her. You know, Amanda said. A child is attached to her mother, and I'm not her aunt yet. That's all right, her husband replied. But it didn't happen. When the woman offered to go with the girl to the children's park to spend time together and get acquainted, she seemed happy at first, but then throughout the walk was terribly cranky. I'm dizzy. I feel sick. I don't want to feed them and I don't want to eat myself. I don't want ice cream either. She refused even her favorite treat. John and Amanda were a little confused by her behavior, so they came home and tried to have dinner together. My stomach hurts, Catherine said, and retreated to her room. So it went on. The girl perceived the new woman of the father exclusively in the bayonet. The man, on the contrary, only dreamed of meeting a new love after several years of lonely life after the death of his wife. So smart and beautiful, he said of Amanda. And they met in a public restroom at the train station. It's a shame to tell this story, the woman laughed later, recalling the situation. But she was not laughing then. In February, she came from her district center to the big city, where she found a job. The bus ride took her only 2 hours, so there were no sanitary stops. By the end of the trip, Amanda had a terrible urge to go to the bathroom. She jumped out of the vehicle and almost ran to the bus station building, but ran into a closed bathroom door. The restroom was closed for repairs, the note on it said. The nearest one was in the train station building. What the hell is this? The woman exclaimed in frustration. But there was no way out, and she hurried toward the train station, which was nearby. To get there, she had to pass through a small square, then go down into an underground passage, where people in a hurry were also pushing and literally stepping on each other's heels. God, couldn't the stations be connected somehow? Many people change from train to bus and vice versa, she muttered to herself. She was sweating in her down jacket from the fast walk. Strands of her brown hair were poking out from under her hat, and the suitcase she was dragging behind her looked like it was going to tear her arm off. Already barely tolerable, Amanda walked into the building and saw the huge lines. The women's restroom. And it's in a train station. However, the toilet is working. One of the people standing there was indignant. There were no people in front of the men's. Amanda, disregarding propriety, opened the door, saw a vacant stall and ran in without thinking. The woman slammed the door shut behind her with a jerk and finally went to the bathroom. Oosh, she sighed in relief and smiled. That incredible feeling of relief. And then she saw that she hadn't closed the latch on the stall door. But it didn't matter, because luckily no one was trying to get in from the other side. The woman pushed the handle and pushed the door open to get out. But it wouldn't open. The handle didn't go all the way down. Amanda jerked on it some more, but to no avail. "What kind of bad luck is this?" she said aloud. "Madam?" came a voice from the next stall, a little surprised to hear that woman's voice. "But do you need help?" Very much, Amanda ventured, embarrassed. "I think the lock's jammed. The knob won't budge." Just a second, she heard the sound of water running from the stall. "Okay, now my hands are blistered. I'll think of a way to get you out." Amanda heard the sound of water running from the faucet, then the sound of a zipper being stretched, and then some rustling. "Found it," the man said cheerfully. He started picking something in the lock, and after a minute he swung the door open. "And here I am, saving the princess imprisoned in the tower," he joked, holding a screwdriver. "Yeah," Amanda smiled. "A good princess upset with the press in front of the toilet." "You're a fine lady." The man winked at her, and she admired his brown eyes. Dark-haired, handsome man. "Thank you," seriously the woman said as she left the stall. "And I'm sorry to barge into the men's room, but I'll tell you the whole epic with the search for the restroom." "Can we go out of here?" the man suggested, "and continue our acquaintance over a cup of tea? My treat." "I agree," Amanda said. "Where can I get something to eat here? I don't know the city." "Let's go to a pancake house right here at the station," the man suggested. "My name is John, by the way." "Amanda," the woman replied. "I agree. The pancake house is good. Let's go before the next leg of the road." They went to the far end of the building, where a sign with the image of appetizing pancakes hung. Once inside, they placed their order. Amanda chose cheese pancakes, and John chose chicken pancakes, plus 2 cups of black tea. We sat down at a table while we waited. "Where are you from?" the man started the conversation. "On business or visiting? Is this your first time here?" "No, not for the first time. I've already come once for an interview. I'm from the district center. We don't have much work there. I found a vacancy here. I got hired, and I'm moving." Brevity is the sister of talent, John smiled. In a few sentences, they informed me of the events of the past few weeks. "And what do you do?" the woman asked. "Where did you get a screwdriver all of a sudden?" "I work in a construction company. Constantly on the road, inspects objects. I accidentally picked up a screwdriver at the construction site after checking the fasteners. I found it on the train, called my colleagues and told them that I would bring it back the next time I visited them." "It was a lucky coincidence for me," Amanda said. "I don't know how long I would have had to sit there if it hadn't been for you." "Oh, our order is ready." John got up and went and got it. "Voila." He put the tray on the table. "I'll pay for it. I insist," the woman said. "You have a lot of money you need for rent. You'll need it now. Keep it, and I won't have to rent a hostel. That's why I got this job. It pays well and I have a place to live. After all, a hostel is cheaper than an apartment." "I see," the man replied. "But still, I'm not used to paying for women. So I insist on treating you." "All right," Amanda accepted. "Where do you live?" "I'm in the suburbs. I own my own house. Built it a few years ago for my family." The woman blushed a little because she was starting to like this man. "Are you married?" "Not anymore?" "No," he answered with restraint. "My wife died, a transient cancer. My daughter is left behind. It's just the 2 of us." "I'm sorry." "My condolences," Amanda said sympathetically. "How old is your daughter?" She'll be 9 soon. She's my pride and joy. She's a good student. She plays sports." "What kind of sports?" "I just got a job. State Athletics Training Center. She does skiing, plans to participate in races, but so far she's only enrolled in a sports school. Enrollment starts at age 9, but the coach was cooperative. Her daughter is a little younger, but they say she has abilities." "Are you an athlete? What kind of sport do you do?" I'm not. I take care of the athlete's health. I'm a nurse. Oh, how interesting. It's a bit of a catch-22, if you'll pardon the expression. I've been getting some injections lately. Don't think I'm sick. I just banged my elbow on a door jamb. Now it's a nerve problem. I can't feel my fingers. There's this nasty feeling that the whole nerve from elbow to hand is like a taut rope. Yeah, it's a minor injury, but it's a nasty one, Amanda agreed. Well, I do not want to go to the clinic for injections only to lose time in lines. So I was thinking of hiring a visiting nurse when I get back from my business trip. Maybe you'd be willing to help me out. Oh, I'd love a part-time job. But how would you get to the suburbs? There's a shuttle bus. If it's convenient for you, I'd rather invite you to our company's office. It's downtown. I'm just working all the time. My daughter is looked after by a governess and my mother-in-law. And me, staying late and at night, it would hardly be convenient for you to come to our house. It's a deal, Amanda said. I'll just check my schedule at the new place and contact you to discuss a convenient time. And for that we need to exchange phone numbers, the man smiled. Write mine down. That's how they began to communicate. And for 10 days, which lasted a course of prescribed injections, they became close. This was undoubtedly due to the daily contemplation of my naked heel, John joked. Yes, I appreciated your confidence, Amanda agreed. They began seeing each other on John's rare days off. His daughter Catherine was very unhappy with Amanda's appearance. Daddy, let's go out. I miss you so much. Why are you leaving home for that woman? The girl asked unhappily. Don't you love me anymore? Of course I do. I just want to take a little break from work and family matters and spend time with someone I like, the man said as affectionately as possible. You'll like her, you'll see. However, the girl took her father's new friend in stride. John and Amanda did not give up hope that the girl will eventually change her mind. But that didn't happen. After the first meeting and a trip to the park, they tried to go to the movies together, but Catherine again only frowned, showing that she was not interested in everything that was happening. You know what I suggest? John suddenly suggested to Amanda the next day. I think if we all live under the same roof, Catherine will realize that we're serious, and she'll soften up on you. I don't think it's time yet, Amanda shrugged. Maybe we should wait. Why wait until we're old? I want to live a full life with my family now, not put everything off for the future, the man insisted. The woman agreed, even though it seemed like a bad idea to her still only a few months after meeting him. She gave up her dorm room and moved in with John. Catherine took this fact with unexpected calm. A week later, Amanda realized why. Honey, my childhood friend Charlie is coming to visit us on Sunday, John said on Friday. He lives in another city and wants to show his fiancée his native New York. But he wants to meet my fiancée too. He hugged the woman and kissed her. And I'm already in bride status, Amanda smiled as she returned the kiss and also hugged the man. Of course, I'm an honest man and I always marry the ones I love, John jokingly assured her. If that can be considered a proposal, then I'm in, Amanda said. That's just in case, the man said affectionately. We'll talk about it later. On Sunday, Amanda woke up early. She set the alarm clock for 8 because it was going to be an active day. She had to feed the guests breakfast after the road, then walk around the city, show the sights to Charlie's fiancée, and in the evening have dinner at a restaurant. Amanda really wanted to make a good impression on the people close to John. Now we'll have a quick coffee, she thought as she looked at the sleeping John. Then I'll do breakfast, and closer to their arrival I'll do my makeup and hair. With those thoughts, she stood up and reached for her glasses, which were on the nightstand. The woman had poor eyesight, so she wore contact lenses for work and other occasions when she left the house. At home, she wore glasses. Now Amanda was running her hand over the surface of the nightstand, trying to find the glasses, but it was as if they weren't there. That's odd, the woman thought. Maybe John moved them. But why? And I don't want to wake him up. She got up, bent over to the nightstand, trying to see what was on it. Then squatted down and ran her hands across the floor, deciding that the glasses might have fallen there. Amanda then looked for them everywhere: on the nightstand at John's side, on the dressing table where her makeup was, and on the windowsill. but the glasses were nowhere to be found. God, I threw away my contact lenses yesterday, remembered the woman. How am I going to get ready for the guests? John was supposed to buy the lenses. Later in the morning, he was going to meet the guests at the train station and could stop at the optician's on the way. For now, without lenses or glasses, Amanda was effectively paralyzed. She couldn't cook, she couldn't clean the house. The feeling of helplessness made her cry. What happened? John woke up. Upon hearing what had happened, he said he would go get the lenses right away. John, at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, where's the optician open? Amanda sighed. I'll find out which store opens first, the man said soothingly. In the meantime, you try to relax. Amanda went back to bed, since she couldn't do anything anyway. John picked up his phone, went online, looked for the nearest optician open from 9 o'clock, and started to get ready to go. Let's listen to some music, he said, handing Amanda a small player. It helps me on business trips when I get tired of looking at my phone on the train. Amanda put on the headphones, turned on the player, and closed her eyes. John was right, the tunes distracted her, and it didn't seem so bad that she wouldn't have time to do her hair as she'd planned. The most important thing for her was to feed her guests. I'll have to do without baking. I won't have time, she realized, and began to rethink the menu. Half an hour later, John returned. Amanda put on her lenses and finally went to wash her face and then to the kitchen. To her surprise, there on the windowsill were her glasses. John, how did they get here? She asked in amazement to the man who had entered next. Did you leave them here? He laughed. You've ruined your own mood this morning. I'm sure I didn't put them here. Why would you? How would I have gotten to the bedroom without them? Well, maybe you're tired. Took them off, left them on. The man shrugged. But Amanda was sure she couldn't have done such a thing. She had a bad suspicion in her head that she decided not to voice for the time being. In a couple of hours, the guests were to arrive, and she didn't want to meet them with a scandal and without food, so she started cooking. The rest of the day went according to plan. John's friend and his fiancée arrived. Everyone liked each other and had a good time. Even Catherine, who had been taken for a walk around the city, seemed to be in a good mood. Maybe I'm imagining things for myself, thought Amanda, observing the girl's behavior. But after a few more days, she became convinced of what she already suspected. The child began to constantly do small nasty things to her, then hide something, then in the yogurt spilled cereal, then throws shoes. Amanda just kept quietly tidying up. After one of the first incidents, she tried to inform John about his daughter's antics, but the response was not what she had hoped for. John, do you really believe I would do such a thing? For some reason, Amanda led the man into the living room where her underwear was strewn across the couch and chairs. Why would Catherine do such a thing? He said indignantly. Because she doesn't like me. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. Remember the stories about the glasses? I don't know why you're snapping at her. It can all be explained by your forgetfulness. I forgot that I left my underwear all over the room, but you what? Let's drop the subject, the man said irritably. I love both you and my daughter, so try not to swear. Nice touch, washed his hands of it, Amanda thought resentfully. Okay, I'm not going to take revenge on the child, I'll be patient. It went on like that for about a year, until the family moved into a new big house. John insisted. I want to see a new family nest in a new place, he told Amanda. I was living with a different family in the old house after all. It's time for us to start our own. You and I have been putting off getting married. But I think we should get married, and the house is officially in your name. You're a little emotional when you talk about such important steps, aren't you? The woman was a little surprised. Perhaps I'm afraid to jinx my happiness, the man smiled. It hurts when you enjoy life, and it is like envy to you as a footstool. Like my first wife died, Catherine had just grown up. I got the job I have now, and everything was going so well. And then it all fell apart. We'll be fine, Amanda said softly. They chose a house together. Catherine was excited about the move. I'll have a big room, the girl rejoiced. Yes, your current one in our old house will seem like a cubbyhole compared to it, John replied. Let's go with your taste. Amanda decided to improve the opportune moment, as long as the girl was in a good mood. "Let's you be the one to choose our common house. Look where you like best, what room, what yard, and so on." "Okay," Catherine agreed cheerfully. John silently took Amanda's hand and discreetly stroked her fingers in appreciation. They found the house quickly enough. The two-story building was located in a quiet neighborhood. There was a small courtyard in front of the front door, and a large area at the back of the building where they could plant flower beds or vegetables. Trees were already growing their fruit: apples, pears, ornamental and birch trees. The whole family literally fell in love with this place, and the deal to buy it was done. A couple weeks later, they moved in and immediately put their old place on the market. "We'll use the money to go on a honeymoon," John said that evening at the first dinner in the new house. "And we're going to furnish the place to our liking. And we'll buy you a car, finally." "Thank you. I'm very happy right now," Amanda replied. "And I'm grateful that you've changed my life." "You changed mine," the man looked at her tenderly. Catherine, who was watching the scene, wrinkled her nose but said nothing. 6 months later, the couple played a wedding. There were few guests: John's father, his mother was dead, Amanda's parents, and a few of their closest friends. An unexpected guest was the man's former mother-in-law. He kept good relations with Anna Vitalievna and even decided to invite her to his new marriage. "God grant you a long life together," she sincerely wished him, raising her glass. Amanda looked at her gratefully, happy that this woman who had lost her daughter had found the strength to accept the new woman who was taking care of her granddaughter. She didn't know then what her ex-mother-in-law's love for her child, the only family she had left, would mean. "I'm not wearing that." Catherine threw her summer dress in Amanda's direction. "They'll make fun of me at school." Years passed. Catherine turned 15 and adolescence was in full force. By this time she had won many competitions in cross-country skiing, received a sports category, and was enrolled in the School of Olympic Reserve. The school year was about to begin, and Amanda offered encouragement to update her closet. It was on the day Amanda was going to take her shopping that Catherine ruined her stepmother's morning coffee. "I'm an athlete, not a party girl," irritatedly said the girl now, running from one outlet to another. "But you're a girl. You have to look like one," Amanda answered her calmly. "You can't always wear tracksuits." "But I do play sports," Catherine countered. "But not all of you. You have to wear something to class, to lectures." "I'll see what other people wear, then I'll decide. But thank you for your concern." Catherine finished the conversation. Amanda sighed and followed the stubborn girl to the sportswear store. Buy new tracksuits. It was impossible to understand her stepdaughter. Sometimes she seemed to be good to her stepmother, and sometimes Amanda found that she continued to sneak around. It usually happened after some sort of spat. "I wonder what she'll come up with tomorrow," the woman thought curiously, waiting for the girl from the fitting room. "Will she put something in my coffee again? Will he delete my files in my laptop or throw out something worse?" But surprisingly, there were no consequences. Despite the disagreement at the store, the girl hadn't gotten back at her stepmother in any way. Amanda had really hoped that the simmering conflict would die down on its own when Catherine entered college and moved into the dormitory. But John insisted that his daughter stay at home. "I know what goes on in these dormitories," he said. "I don't want you wasting your time hanging out instead of studying." At that moment, Catherine and Amanda finally shared something in common: disappointed facial expressions. Both had hoped to see each other less often. "Oh well, I'll wait for her to get married," Amanda thought with bitter irony. The everyday life dragged on. Everything went on as usual. John often went on business trips. Amanda worked as a nurse. Catherine was at college until late in the evening. A phone call interrupted the routine, and in December, disaster struck. "We can't find your husband," Amanda got a call from the college that afternoon. "Your little girl has been seriously injured. She's in the emergency room." Amanda didn't remember taking off work and calling a cab. Despite everything, she loved this girl, even though she didn't reciprocate. She ran to the emergency room and learned that Catherine had a displaced tibia fracture and was being prepped for emergency surgery. "Do you need parental consent?" the woman asked the young doctor who admitted Catherine. "Her father is now in another city, and I did not adopt her. Can I give permission?" "It's okay," the doctor replied. "At 15, she can consent to surgery on her own." "Okay," Amanda said, confused. "So it's bad. What's the prognosis?" "I'm not an attending physician. I just examined her and referred her for surgery," the man replied. "Talk to a specialist later. All I can say is that this type of fracture is complex, and rehabilitation after it is very long. But she will not be disabled. She's an athlete." "Let's hope not," shrugged the doctor. "Understand, everything will be clear at the operation depends on how well the specialist will be able to assemble the bone. I really can neither scare nor reassure you." "It's fine now." "I'm sorry," Amanda said. "Wait until the surgery is over. The doctors will come out and tell you everything at once." The woman went to wait in the lobby of the clinic. She tried to call John, but he didn't pick up. Maybe he's in negotiations, Amanda thought, even though it had been hours already, and no one still couldn't reach him. How worried is he going to be, poor guy? I guess I can't understand these parental feelings. After all, it's not like I don't have kids. Her thoughts jumped to the unpleasant history of their attempts to have a child. Amanda and John had thought about it a couple of years ago. When their life together had settled down, they were in their early 30s, and the chances of having a baby were quite high. However, Amanda was not able to get pregnant. They had undergone numerous tests that showed the couple to be perfectly healthy. "There are such cases," explained the fertility doctor. "There may be something going on due to nervous tension, and the body doesn't want to get pregnant in a stressful situation of the stressors." Amanda could only remember her relationship with her stepdaughter. Otherwise, she and John had a calm, measured life without upheaval. And it appeared that, ironically, she was unable to have a child because of the presence of another child in her life. Her nervous thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was John. "Oh my God," he said, horrified to hear what had happened. "I'm on my way. I'll be there tomorrow. Take care of everything, please." The girl was operated on immediately. The doctor came out to Amanda and said he was satisfied with the result. Catherine was coming out of anesthesia, and the woman was told that she could visit her tomorrow. Amanda went home. "It's unaccustomedly quiet here," she thought as she entered the house. Amanda went to the bedroom, and from her worry she powerlessly sank down on the bed and fell asleep. It was as if everything went well from there. Catherine was discharged, being warned that she would have a cast for at least 2 months. The girl was very upset because she missed classes and was basically very limited in movement. She sat at home, read a lot, and watched movies. "You look so downcast," Amanda said, looking at her daughter. "What do you want?" "She's very worried about not being able to play her favorite sport," John replied. "It's hard for her at her age to put up with so much. It's all about getting it right," John sighed. "I'm sure she'll catch up with her classmates." But Catherine was not so lucky. When it came to the point to remove the cast and begin the long rehabilitation process, it turned out that the bones are not properly healed, and there were symptoms of osteoporosis. The bone had become less dense and less strong, the doctor explained to John and Amanda. This can lead to new fractures, even from minor stresses. "What should we do?" John asked. His voice trembled. "Treat it. First, we have another operation as soon as possible, and then take special drugs to stimulate bone formation. The endocrinologist prescribes them." "That's good. Who do you recommend?" clarified the worried father. "I would recommend treatment abroad. There are good clinics in Germany, but it will be expensive, you understand." "We'll find the money," John replied calmly. They drove home depressed in Amanda's car. The woman was driving. John and Catherine sat in the back. The girl pressed herself against her father and cried quietly, realizing that it will not soon be able to take up skiing and generally return to the usual way of life. "I'll have to leave the school," finally raised her voice Catherine. "Let's not be in a hurry," John said soothingly and held his daughter to himself. "Take a sabbatical for a year." Amanda was silent the whole way there and back. The woman sympathized with Catherine, but she had some very important news of her own that she didn't want to tell her family yet. What good fortune. What bad timing, Amanda thought in the bathroom this morning when she saw the 2 long-awaited stripes on the pregnancy test. No, the good news will have to wait after all. I have to deal with Catherine first." The woman decided and put the test back in the package, and then hid it in the pocket of her robe. And now, on her way home, she tried her best to hide her joy at finally becoming a mother. No matter how hard she tried to shift her focus to her stepdaughter's health, Amanda couldn't escape the thoughts of her future child. Boy or girl, she pondered. And how will they get along with Catherine? Won't she be jealous if she starts doing nasty things like she did to me? This is where Amanda started to get worried. And that's when she intercepted her stepdaughter's tense gaze in the rearview mirror. Amanda flinched. She was staring at her with unconcealed anger. The woman averted her eyes and gripped the steering wheel. She felt very scared. She had a premonition of something very bad. "I found a suitable clinic for Catherine in Germany," John said a few days later. "Now I will collect the money. The amount, of course, astronomical, more than 1,000,000 rubles. And this is only for the operation. And also rehabilitation." "What's all this money for?" Amanda was horrified. "It includes not only surgery, but also tests, a consultation with an orthopedic traumatologist before the operation, and examination after the surgery. 3 days in the hospital, 6 days in a hotel. And transportation pick-up from the airport, take to the hospital, and then to the hotel." I see. The woman sighed. "At least afterward, when Catherine comes home, I'll be able to take care of her myself. I'm a nurse, so at least we'll save a little money." "Why don't you want money from me?" Catherine suddenly said rudely. "There's plenty to spend it on." Amanda was taken aback. "I just wanted to know what the money would be used for. So it's all inclusive, except for the food. That means there's money for that too." "You're right," said John. "I plan to borrow the whole amount from the director of my company and pay off part of her salary." John served the whole amount and made an appointment. The director agreed to give the money in a large advance, and John received it a few days later. "I've never seen so much money," Amanda said as they spread the bills out on their bed to do an exact count. "It should be enough for everything, both surgery and rehab." "But I'll give you more if you need it," John said. "Children are sacred." "How do I tell him I'm pregnant?" Amanda thought after he said that. Maybe I should wait until Catherine's surgery and then tell him the good news. They put the money in the nightstand in the bedroom and went to bed. In the morning, everyone went to work, leaving Catherine to pack. For the hospitalization, her grandmother Anne came over to help. All day Amanda was distracted. She barely worked her shift. Tired, she got in her car and drove home. The next day she felt worse, dizzy and nauseous. Could it be toxemia? Amanda thought. It's a little early. Maybe it's the age thing. I wouldn't drive today, in case she felt sick, so I'd call a cab. At work, she felt bad. She excused herself and went to see a gynecologist. Her eyes were blurry. Could Catherine have poisoned me with something? She had a terrible thought. No, she's not capable of serious harm. She can't do a little mischief, but she can't poison me. The doctor advised Amanda to drink plenty of water, to include fermented milk products and porridge in her diet, and prescribed magnesium and vitamin B6 supplements. Amanda drove home, wishing she could go to bed sooner. She felt weak and drowsy, but a nightmare awaited her at home. The money's gone. She was startled to see John at her doorstep. How? Catherine was home, and her grandmother Anne. Who could have gotten in? They say they left to buy Catherine a backpack for the road. The old one was all worn out. But who could have known we had that kind of money at home? Only ours. Your principal. Amanda was thinking out loud. I'm shocked, to be honest, John admitted. We have to leave tomorrow. Everything's been arranged, and we don't have the money. Amanda went up to the second floor, went into the bedroom and sat down on the bed at a loss. Her head was simply splitting. Her brain refused to recognize the reality of what was happening. She stared blankly at the nightstand where the money had been lying in the morning and didn't know how to comfort her husband. We found the money. She suddenly heard Anne's voice from downstairs. Amanda struggled to get up and walk downstairs. She was glad that the situation was resolved and wanted to know what had happened. She walked into the living room, and Anne said caustically, "Shame on you, thief." "What are you talking about?" Amanda asked, puzzled. How could you steal money from a sick child? Anne turned to her. It's a good thing I thought to look in your car. And we found the whole amount there, added Catherine, who was sitting next to her grandmother on the couch. John looked at his wife in silence with contempt. She did not know what to say, so absurd were these accusations. She hid them in the trunk under a bag with some tools, said Anne. I didn't expect that. You've lived together for so many years, and you? Why did you skip work today? Catherine added. We're thinking where to hide the money? Were you looking for a safety deposit box? Or did you want to give it to your lover, but you didn't have time to take it out? What is this nonsense? Amanda finally found her voice. And how do you know I wasn't at work? I called you to see if you had an extra backpack. I had a doctor's appointment. You could have called my cell phone. Why would you call my cell phone at work? Catherine said. I don't understand what you're thinking about money. You didn't plan any of this? That wasn't the plan. Anne interrupted her. Maybe you planted it on me, suddenly realizing, turned to Catherine. Amanda, nice setup. Very skillfully thought out this time. Slipping money into my car. It's not like putting pepper in my coffee. You're an asshole, not a human being. The woman suddenly burst into tears. All these years we've been living, and you're ruining my life. So John roared. Shut up, and he turned on his wife. How dare you yell at my child, and a sick one at that? And how dare she accuse your wife of incomprehensible things? Amanda parried. Do you have some kind of double standard? Fuck you, suddenly bellowed her husband. You can't touch my daughter, you infertile fool. I have you for her. Wanted to ruin her life. Disrupt the operation urgently. Are you out of your mind? I would never in my life have started, was Amanda, but no one was listening to her. Get out, yelled John. I don't want to see you. I'll file for divorce as soon as I get back from Germany. And I'll be damned if I leave you any property. 2 months later, Amanda sat in her dorm room and calculated how much money she had left before her paycheck. The amount was not encouraging. She had to keep buying vitamin supplements. Pregnancy was harder on her than expected. And I don't have any savings, Amanda pondered. And nothing to sell. John took everything from me. He signed the house over to himself in the divorce with his lefty lawyers in the car, and even the gifts he gave me. Over the years, all my inexpensive jewelry. Only her parents knew about her pregnancy. She didn't have time to tell John at first, and afterward she didn't want to. She was too hurt by the way her ex-husband had treated her. Maybe you should tell him, after all, Margaret's mother exhorted the woman. I don't want to. The daughter shook her head negatively. My child doesn't need a father who threw his mother out on the street after 6 years of living together without much of a trial. Take my grandmother on Dad's side of the family. She split up with her husband because of him. Too, he cheated on her. So she went to her house in a remote village and did not let him on the doorstep when he came to repent. And after that he lived as a hermit. So she took offense at the whole world. I remember that story, Mom. I only visited her a couple of times when I was a child, and after that she refused to accept everyone and got into herbs. She treated the locals, but for some reason she didn't want to know her family. Strange, isn't it? And her house is still intact. But no one goes there. When they buried her, they forgot the road. It's probably overgrown. But I'm not going to be a hermit, Amanda smiled. I have no grudges against the whole world, just one person. It was time for the first ultrasound. A few months ago, Amanda never imagined that she would have to go in for a checkup alone, without her loving husband, on such an important day. Her mom was back in town. She couldn't stay with her daughter. Amanda's father had had a stroke and the man needed to be cared for. So the baby is fine, the doctor who performed the ultrasound told Amanda. Do you want to know who it's going to be? Yes. Amanda opened her eyes in anticipation and smiled contentedly when she heard the answer. It had been a year. John had been working on his daughter's rehabilitation the whole time. The operation in Germany was successful, but the cast was not removed for a long time, and it took a long time to develop the leg after all this. However, despite all efforts, Mary limped, and her character from this did not improve at all. "Why did fate do this to me?" said the girl irritably to her father. "I wanted to devote my life to sports. And what in the end? What am I to do now? To live and recover in time is how long has it been? Do you believe I'll miraculously heal and start skiing again?" "Look, but you can be more than just an athlete or a coach. There are different training programs, including for people with disabilities." "What do you think I am? Handicapped?" Catherine exclaimed with tears of anger in her eyes. "No, that's not what I meant to say." John tried to calm his daughter. But she did not listen and went to her room. These conversations were happening more and more often, and they were devastating to the man. "I was always on her side," he thought bitterly. "So many years did not marry, took care of her feelings. Kicked the traitor Amanda out when I found out she was dirty. Now I live alone. Why doesn't she appreciate that?" The young man was totally dependent on his daughter's whims. He reluctantly went home from work, because there he was waiting for a frowning-faced Catherine and her eternal dissatisfaction with complaints. He began to spend even more time on business trips, and in one of them met a nice woman, Amber. She worked as a waitress at the restaurant where he and his partners went for dinner. "Where do you always go at night?" "After a month, my daughter suspected something was wrong." "I go out with my friends." "Not all I have to babysit you." John cut him off. In fact, he did not want to tell his daughter about his personal life, remembering her attitude to Amanda. The man offered Amber to move to his town, rented her an apartment the income allowed, and visited her several times a week. Amber accepted the status of secret lover. "I don't care," she told her friend in a telephone conversation. "Like a cheese and butter I roll around. I don't have to work. I make eyes at him. I chase his legs, and he, sweetheart, is ready for anything." She laughed. "You're lucky," she sighed enviously. "I would have to find someone to provide me with everything." "Maybe we'll get married." Amber continued to brag. "I've been hinting at him, working him up, but he's afraid to introduce me to his daughter. According to his stories, she's a very spoiled, capricious girl." "But good luck to you," wished her friend. "At least call me to the wedding. I'm sure you'll get what you want." But the plans of calculating Amber was not destined to materialize. However, it was only her own fault she missed socializing. Sitting alone in her apartment 24 hours a day, she got herself a lover, 20-year-old Michael from the neighboring entrance, who was constantly looking at the poor woman, who went shopping at the grocery store in a provocative short dress and stilettos. One day she lured him with her finger into the entryway, and he obediently followed her. "You are my goddess," whispered the enchanted young man, lying in bed after his lovemaking. His admiration pleased her ego but let her guard down. One day she was kissing a young lover in the street near her driveway and didn't notice John pulling up in his car. He got out of the car and stood silently watching Amber and Michael embrace. "Young man," he finally said snidely, "let me help you pack up your beauty's things and take them outside. She's moving in with you now, I suppose." Amber and Michael looked away from each other, stunned. The woman realized it was pointless to make excuses in such a situation and, sighing, went to her entryway to say goodbye to her apartment and to pack up her belongings. What a fool, she thought frustratedly. Now to return home with nothing to eat. "Emberochka, really move in with me," Michael said, catching up with her on the stairs. "Are you stupid?" she answered rudely, opening the apartment. "Milk on your lips is not dried up, and you're already climbing up skirts? Get out," and slammed the door in his face. The confused guy with the eyes of a hurt kitten remained standing in the stairwell, but Amber didn't care about him anymore. "God, who have I messed with?" John pondered as he walked home. It's from loneliness, apparently not recognizing a woman of easy virtue, he began to feel very sorry for himself. It felt like he was paying the price. But by an effort of will the man restrained himself. At home he was waiting for the second part of the play, which could be called a comedy of situations. But it was not a comedy, but a tragedy. Catherine met her father with hysterics. "I want to go to the sea," she declared, suddenly entering the living room, where the man sat down to rest from emotion. "Catherine is tired of sitting at home and going to doctors. Daughter, it is necessary to heal. Something cranky. We'll go on vacation in a couple of months, I promise." Why not now? I'm tired. I want to swim. It's good for my leg. Let's go this week, she demanded of her father. Stop it, John shouted at her, his nerves finally giving out. First the mistress surprised him, then the daughter made demands. Why are you yelling at me? Why are you acting like a little kid? You're an adult, but you're only doing things. You're sassing me. What do you want? You don't like me. Maybe your new baby will be better. Is that what you're counting on? What baby, for God's sake? John waved her away. I'm not having any kids. If you found out about Amber somehow, don't worry, I broke up with her. Amber? Who the hell is Amber? I meant your Amanda. Did she have an abortion or something? I don't get it, John frowned. Why are you bringing her up? And what does that have to do with the abortion? But she should have been in labor by now. Didn't you even ask if you had a son or a daughter? She was pregnant when she left here. It finally came to John. I didn't know about it. How did you know? I found a 2-stripe pregnancy test in her robe. She obviously didn't put someone else's in there. Oh my God. So you really did go through her stuff all the time, just like she said. And I was a fool not to believe it. Yes, Catherine smirked. I got rid of her beautifully, didn't I? Our plan was a success. John silently looked at the monster, in which he could not recognize his daughter, and with horror waited for the continuation, although he was beginning to guess what she means. Grandma Ann helped me, the girl said. As soon as I found this test, I realized that you would soon abandon me. New wife, new offspring. Her tone became dismissive when it came to the baby. So I got my grandmother to help me plant money for my stepmother. I could barely walk on my own. How could you? John exhaled in shock. Grandmother broke quickly, boasted Catherine. She has no one but me. She was already worried about me. And then I frightened her that you'll start a new family. You'd dump me, an invalid, on her. So it's about money. It turns out, looked at Catherine father. In general, yes, she shamelessly confirmed. The man got up, left the living room and went to the second floor, not seeing the road. He came to his senses when he hit his toes on the banister, as if in a fog. Climbing the stairs, he went into his office, where there was a small bar, took out a bottle of cognac, a glass, sat down at his desk, and began to get methodically drunk. After a couple hours staggering, he went downstairs and hailed a cab. Get me Amanda, who recently moved in, he demanded of the janitor at the hostel where his wife had lived before their marriage. Amanda who? Go sleep it off, she scolded. I'll call the police. Nurse Amanda. She was supposed to move in here a year ago. I know exactly who you're talking about. She moved out before she gave birth. Bought herself a house. A house? John was surprised. Where did she get the money? You mean her ex-husband? The one who kicked her pregnant and penniless out of the house. She earned the money for the house. It was a very interesting story when she was 6 months pregnant. Amanda had lost her spirit. She went to work, returned to her dormitory in utter despondency. Didn't know where she was going to get the money to support her child. Her parents could not help. The father needed expensive medicines and physiotherapy. The woman didn't even think about returning to her hometown and creating additional expenses for her mother, for herself, and the child. Can't do this anymore, she thought as Emily lay in her one room on an uncomfortably narrow bunk that made her back ache. I need a distraction, somewhere to get out so I don't spend a lot of money. And then the conversation with her mother about her reclusive grandmother popped into her head. Amanda was revitalized. It would be possible to go to that abandoned cottage, to walk away from the noisy city, to breathe the forest air. And in a few minutes she was on her way. The cabin was only 30 kilometers from the city. You could get to the nearest village by electric train, and then you had to walk a couple of kilometers through the forest. How overgrown is everything here, marveled the woman when she reached the place. And here my grandmother had medicinal herbs and a vegetable garden. She stepped inside the cabin. The shriveled door was unlocked. Inside was old furniture covered in dust. Amanda found a stool, laid a cellophane bag she had with her on it, and sat down to rest from the road. She was in a strange mood. How nice to go back to childhood for a little while, she thought. And how sad that I'm as lonely as my grandmother was. And then the woman's gaze fell on a puffy Soviet-era stationery book lying on a table nearby. She reached out, picked it up, and dust kicked up into the air. The recipes were written in the book in chemical pencil. I didn't know Grandma was into self-medication, Amanda marveled. She opened the book, and there were recipes for healing ointments and other remedies her grandmother had made. There were a good 100 of them, if not more. Leafing through the book, Amanda noticed a section called Back Pain. Interesting to try this, she thought. My back is hurting more and more every month. Late in the pregnancy, it's scary to think what will happen. I'll take this tome with me. At home, she prepared the ointment, having bought at the pharmacy those herbs that were in the recipe, and Vaseline as a base, tried to apply it to herself. And oh miracle! After 2 days, the pain in her back went away. The interested woman decided to try other recipes. Okay, let's try a hair mask. Amanda thought she was stressed because of her pregnancy and it caused a dull complexion. She decided to try the face mask because her skin looked terrible. The effect surprised not only her but also her co-workers. After a month, her skin was soft and her hair was smooth and shiny. Women at work flooded her with questions about what miracle remedy she was using. Amanda made them each a jar of her concoctions but didn't reveal the recipe. Word spread quickly, and soon she had a line of people lined up to receive the healing substances. We need to get someone to help, Amanda decided, and offered the job to the woman who lived closest to her. The same janitor who was now telling the story to John. I mostly just sit here, the older woman told the man. There's nothing to do at night, so I used to work part-time for your wife. And then she started selling goods through social media. It went well, and she moved into a small shop. Opened it up and hired full-time help. John froze as he learned of his wife's fate. He had thought her a conniving liar until now, but it turned out that she was a capable businesswoman who started her own business without anyone's help. The child. She gave birth, he inquired quietly. Yes, I can give you the address. You can talk to her yourself, the woman relented. Even though you have rattled her nerves. She was very fond of you at the time. John took the slip of paper with the address and thanked the woman profusely. Though he wanted to run to Amanda, he held back and went home, deciding he needed to get some sleep, sober up, and get himself back to normal. The next morning he showered, shaved, drank a few cups of coffee, and drove his car to his ex-wife's house. The closer he got to her house, the more nervous he became. What will she say to me? How will she take it? He pondered. If I were her, I'd probably spit in her face. He drove up to the right house, hidden by a tall green fence, got out of the car and knocked on the gate. After a while it swung open. Amanda looked up at him with the baby in her arms. John stood silent, unable to find the right words. Come in, the woman said, moving aside and letting him pass. I just found out about everything. About the pregnancy, John pronounced, waiting for her to close the wicket. She looked at him carefully and nodded toward the open door. Come inside. I'll give you tea. I had no desire to inform you after everything that's happened, Amanda said calmly as she walked into the kitchen. Sit down, I'll put the kettle on now. And how is Catherine? Has she recovered? Not so good. 1 minute she's better, the next she's worse. Moody. Behavior is atrocious because of it. I'm not surprised, Amanda smiled, rocking the baby who flinched at the sound of the kettle boiling. She wasn't an angel in the good times either. But whatever she thought, I treated her well and worried about her health. And she did such an ungrateful thing. She confessed everything John said. Said it was her and Anne who set you up. What was the point of that? Why so jealous of me and the baby? Amanda sighed. And that's him. You said baby, so is it a boy? A boy, the woman blurted out in a smile as she looked at her son. We're 4 months old soon. What did you name him? John held out his hands and Amanda gently handed the baby to him. Stepan Jonovich. Sound good? Tears came to the man's eyes. Sweetheart, can you forgive me? I was not myself because of my daughter's illness. I snapped at you. I believed everything. You know, with the baby coming, I've begun to understand you better, Amanda replied. I don't know how I would have coped if Stepashka had gotten sick. How would I have behaved? So you can forgive me, John repeated. The most important question for him right now. Amanda answered it. We'll see. 6 months later, they celebrated a birthday. The baby was a year old. There were few guests, only the closest ones. Amanda's parents came. Her father got better and was able to endure the road. Also present were John's father and Catherine and her grandmother. I can't help but admire your kindness, John whispered to Amanda, taking a moment when they were alone in the kitchen preparing to bring out the desserts for the holiday table. You've forgiven Catherine and her grandmother. I think they've realized what they've done and are truly remorseful. What's the big deal? Holding a grudge for the rest of your life? Especially now. After all, it was lucky to have such a sister as Catherine became. John smiled. Yes, she really cares for him. Who would have thought it? She's forgotten about sports. She wants to be a teacher. God grant us all wishes, said Amanda. I already have all my wishes, the man replied. I have a real strong family. All my loved ones are with me every day. They hugged each other and looked into the living room, where at the same table were gathered people who had made mistakes and were eager to correct them, who were angry with despair but found the strength to overcome themselves and rejoice in the changes, who fought with illnesses but inspired others with their kindness, and of course, who knew how to forgive their loved ones. After all, family is the most important, the most valuable thing in our lives.